A familiar fate one. Geralt frowned with obvious trepidation as he studied Black Nail. The hobgoblin simply smiled back in a cheerful manner. That always disarmed humans, or maybe it stunned them, Black Nail wasn't sure. It worked. That was what mattered. It was midday, and people were walking past them on the street as they both stood outside a rather fancy-looking inn that was located on a busy city street. It had stained glass windows and its sign bore the image of a wine bottle and a silver fork. Black Nail had his hood up so that he didn't draw attention, and the other former members of Herod's band had already gone inside. Are you sure you don't want to join us? Geralt asked. We're planning on holding a celebratory feast, and it won't be the same without you. You were our guide here. Let us reward you. We can rent a private room to help keep you incognito. I was the leader, not just the guide, Black Nail pointed out. Ah, yes. That too. Black Nail felt the urge to roll his eyes, but he suppressed it. That would be rude. It was amazing that humans were stupid enough to believe that he was stupid enough not to catch the nuance of their words. Did they think he was as stupid as they were? Well, whatever. Their reluctance to admit he was the best leader they had ever had wasn't an issue right now. No, I got things to do, very important things. I need to visit some people I met here before. They will be very excited to see me. Hey, I keep forgetting that you came here with Herod last year. But all that can wait. Think of all the food and drink you will be missing, and Kida is expecting you to join us. She wouldn't have gone in without us otherwise. I'm fine, and Kida can bother someone else for a while. I'm busy. The young redhead had mostly recovered from the injuries she had acquired during the battle at Shelter, but the journey here had taken a lot out of her, so she had gone ahead to sit down. There will be more meat pies than you can eat. Black Nail wavered. That was a tempting offer. He could eat a lot of meat pies. Maybe his plans could wait. No, he had to prioritize and resist temptation. He would just have to rob a store later tonight, when he was done. Sounds tasty, but I can't. I will see you soon, Black Nail responded before turning to leave. He had to focus on the mission. Pies were secondary to vengeance, most of the time. Good luck then, and try to stay out of trouble. Geralt had called after him. The man was obviously torn between keeping an eye on Black Nail and finally getting the rest and relaxation he had been craving for months, but his impatience had won. All of the former bandits had filled their pockets with coin from the slain raiders. Of course. Don't worry, I'm amazingly sneaky, and I will keep my head down, Black Nail replied cheerfully as he turned to wave goodbye. He was going to do the exact opposite of what he had just said. Without a shred of guilt, Black Nail turned back around and started walking away. The hobgoblin's cloak trailed behind him as he moved down the street, and people got out of the way. He had engineered everyone's return to Dagger Point for a purpose, and it was time to get to it. About 3 weeks had passed since the defeat of the raiders who had attacked Shelter. While Geralt and the others had been resting and relaxing, Black Nail had hunted down the fleeing remnants of the raiders. He and his minions had stalked them through the forest and worn them down with constant surprise attacks until they were easy pickings. It had been both a necessary part of Black Nail's grand plan and a lot of fun. There was just something so sweet and right about a good hunt with a bloody ending. It warmed Black Nail's hobgoblin heart. Once the last of the raiders were dead and no longer amusing, Black Nail had returned to Shelter and finally guided his companions east through the green to Dagger Point. The journey had taken a while, but it had been mostly uneventful, until he had dropped them off at the inn behind him. After walking past a tailor's shop, Black Nail stopped at a corner. He brought his fingers to his mouth and whistled sharply. The shrill noise caused several people to look his way, but Black Nail ignored them, and there was soon a replying whistle from off in the distance. Black Nail headed towards the noise. He walked down the road, stepped behind a fruit booth, and slipped into an alleyway that was out of sight of everyone on the road. The side street wasn't empty though. 24 cloaked figures were standing in the shadows. They looked Black Nail's way as he approached, and he saw into their shadowy hoods to get a good look at their faces. They were hobgoblins. Black Nail quickly counted them to make sure they were all there. They were. Good, you made it into the city without any problems. Yep, it wasn't even hard, Scamp replied proudly. We climbed the wall. All the humans didn't even look our way, and they couldn't smell us if we were sticking our fingers up their small pink noses. Why do they even have noses? Another hobgoblin asked, no one in particular. Before leaving Shelter, Black Nail had assembled a group of hobgoblins and ordered them to follow in secret. Scamp hadn't been Black Nail's first choice for sub-leader, but Gob was needed back at their main base, and after Black Nail, Scamp was actually the most experienced hobgoblin when it came to dealing with humans. He had also been raised in Herod's camp when he was a goblin. Black Nail took a moment to study his minions. Entering the city had affected each hobgoblin differently. The place was incredibly alien to most of them since they had been born and raised out in the forest. Some were excited while others were more nervous, but all of them seemed distracted and jumpy. Several weren't even looking in Black Nail's direction. They were scanning the shadows for danger or trying to peer past Black Nail to get a look at all activity on the street behind him. To remedy this, Black Nail hissed and slapped the nearest hobgoblin across the side of the head. That got their attention. Pay attention to me. I'm your leader, Black Nail told his minions. You don't need to fear the humans here. They are blind and stupid. As long as you are with me you will be safe, so ignore all the delicious smells. I will get us all tasty food later. This speech reassured the hobgoblins a fair bit and they calmed down enough to give Black Nail their complete attention. What are we doing here, boss? Are we going to steal a whole bunch of tasty and shiny stuff? Scamp asked. No. Stealing is bad, Black Nail replied as he kicked a surprised scamp in the shin. We are here to learn from the humans, and then we will probably kill a whole bunch of them. If those people just happen to have lots of interesting items for us to take, then that isn't stealing because they aren't using the stuff anymore, since they are dead. That makes sense to me, another hobgoblin agreed. A lot of other minions nodded, while Scamp winced and shook his sore leg. The first person we are looking for is a mage. He knows some fancy magic stuff I need. So we are going to talk to him. Hera asked as she stepped right up next to Black Nail and stared into his eyes. Black Nail leaned away from her. He had considered leaving the female hobgoblin behind, but she was one of his best disguise artists and voice mimics. She was one of the few hobgoblins who could sound completely human, and she even had a blonde wig. Also, she had really wanted to come, and he wasn't sure she would have listened if he said no. Sort of. His name is Murderous, and he probably won't want to share his magic with me, so we are going to sneak into his house and ask him about it when none of his servants are around. We don't want to meet his guards. They are tough fighters and rather unfriendly. Once all of his minions had fully grasped the details of the mission, Black Nail led the way deeper into the city. Murderous lived near the center of the city where most of the big fancy houses were. To avoid unwanted attention, Black Nail chose to move through the back streets and less occupied portions of city. His cloaked hobgoblin minions trotted after him, as they moved through the shadows and grimy alleys. It felt weird to be back in Dagger Point. The city was the same. It was still a steaming heap of nose-burning scents, both good and bad, but he was here under very different circumstance than his first visit. Then he had been one of Herod's servants and now he was the leader of his own group. Black Nail's right hand tightened into a fist as he suddenly felt the ache of Cedar's absence. Soon. The hobgoblins ran into people more than once as they stalked through the back streets, but after one glance at Black Nail's party, the people all quickly disappeared without a word. This was Dagger Point and everyone here knew better than to go looking for trouble. It soon became obvious that there was no immediate danger of discovery, so the hobgoblins began talking amongst themselves. There are so many humans here, one remarked in awe. There is even more garbage, another replied as he scowled down the unidentifiable substance he had just stepped in. Oh yay. The pinkies are everywhere. They have lots of cities all over the place. You just don't see them out in the forest much because almost all of them are too stupid to survive there without being in a huge mob, Black Nail replied as he kept walking. The group passed an alley that led out into a street where several food vendors were hawking their wares. The aroma of the greasy food wafted out and enveloped the hobgoblins. Two of them instinctively moved to investigate, and Black Nail had to drag them back by their cloaks. After a couple of quick punishment swats, they kept moving. All the hobgoblins with Black Nail had been thoroughly trained, but they were still hobgoblins. Each of them had been taught self-discipline the same way Black Nail had, through intensive and exhausting swordsmanship lessons. The only way to escape the embarrassing beatings was for them to seize control of their emotions and learn the skills necessary to fight. This self-discipline was necessary because hobgoblins were violent and antisocial by nature. In the wild, hobgoblins usually murdered each other at first sight. Those that failed to learn to suppress their urges were executed. They were too dangerous to keep around and of no use to Black Nail. After observing his minions, Black Nail had also come to realize that a lot of the successful hobgoblins changed throughout their training. Some developed quirks such as nail biting or making clicking noises when stressed, while others became obsessed with something. The hobgoblin walking right behind Black Nail would stop and tap his elbow every few seconds. Black Nail was glad he hadn't picked up any weird quirks like that when Cedar had trained him. Soon the hobgoblins reached an area where the houses were squeezed together and the back alleys came to an end, so they quickly stepped out onto a main road. It wasn't particularly busy there, but there was more than a few people about, and Black Nail's group drew a fair amount of attention. Cloaked figures were hardly rare in Dagger Point, but although the hobgoblins' features were hidden, there was still something off-putting about them. Maybe it was the way they moved, or maybe it was their height that raised people's hackles. There were lots of humans as short as hobgoblins, but they didn't usually wear dark cloaks and travel together in large groups. Before they could draw too much attention though, Black Nail led his minions back down into an alley. No one raised an alarm behind them, so they kept going. After a bit more walking, they reached a tall wall that ran between two homes. 2 by 2, the hobgoblins jumped and grabbed the top so they could pull themselves up and over it. Once they landed on the other side, they had reached the central district of the city. The going here was tougher. It was the only place where the city watch patrolled, and although they tended to let most people enter and leave unmolested, Black Nail was sure they would be suspicious of his minions. They weren't as good at disguising themselves as he was. The key to mimicking humans was to walk around like you were blind and about to walk right into something. Black Nail peered out from behind the corner of a building and looked around. He didn't see any guards, so he motioned for his minions to follow. All together, they ran across the street and jumped into some shrubbery that bordered a yard. A few moments later, they leapt out and ran over to the neighbor's place. Like this, they made their way down the street until they had arrived at their destination. In front of Black Nail was the fenced-in property where he had met Murderous. Like before, the long path up to the house was barred by a metal gate, but now there was no huge glowering guard watching over the entrance. It looked deserted. Carefully, Black Nail signaled for his minions to hold their position and then went to investigate. He nonchalantly walked over to the gate and looked around. No one stepped out to stop him, so he placed a hand on the iron gate. His gentle touch caused it to swing open on its well-oiled hinges. Black Nail froze, but no guards appeared, so he stepped inside and glanced towards the house. There were no signs of activity, so he signaled for his minions to follow him. Once they were all past the gate, the hobgoblins crept up the pathway that led to the house. One side of it was bordered by a neatly trimmed hedge, so they kept their heads low as they moved. As they approached the door, Black Nail noticed that it had been left slightly open. He watched the windows of the huge mansion before him for any signs of movement as he stalked over to the door and carefully examined it. The lock had been busted. The wood was splintered around the metal plate and wouldn't shut properly anymore. Black Nail grunted and peered inside. The house was dark and empty. This wasn't going anything like he had planned. He wasn't sure what was going on, but it didn't seem likely that Avorlus was inside and off guard. After his minions had joined him, Black Nail pulled the door open and they entered Avorlus's mansion. The reception room was exactly as Black Nail remembered, except for the lack of people and the huge hole that someone had blasted through one of the interior walls. This is definitely the house of a mage. Something went boom, Scamp remarked as he walked over to the hole and examined it. The edges of the rubble were burnt black. I don't think Avorlus did that, Black Nail replied as he reached Scamp's side. I'd bet that some other humans with magic attacked this place. The scent of blood was thick within the mansion and there were other signs of battle everywhere. As the hobgoblins explored the other rooms they found more blast marks, some rather extensive water damage, shards of black crystal jutting out from walls, and what looked like a bottomless pit in the middle of a hallway. Do you think this is supposed to be here? A hobgoblin asked as he peered down into the pit's black depths. The wooden floor around the hole had been cracked and torn. No, humans don't like having holes in the ground in places where they walk a lot, Black Nail replied. He knew this from experience. More searching revealed quite a few interesting items that quickly disappeared into hobgoblin pockets but no signs of Avorlus. There were also a lot of books and bits of paper with writing on them scattered around the house, but none of the hobgoblins could read. Black Nail hoped the secrets he was looking for weren't written on any of them. It hadn't occurred to him to bring a human in case he needed someone to make sense of their scribbling. What do we do now, boss? I don't think your magic man is here, Scamp asked when they had all returned to the reception room. Black Nail sighed and thought it over quickly. He needed to find Avorlus, even if it meant taking some risks. Hopefully the mage was still alive. Stay here, Black Nail orders his minions. The hobgoblin chieftain then went back to the largest and most luxurious bedroom they had found and started searching it. It took him a few minutes to find what he was looking for, several articles of clothing that smelled strongly of Avorlus. He grabbed them and then handed them out to his minions. What's this for? I already took a nicer looking shirt. It has silver buttons, a hobgoblin remarked as he held the brown shirt he had been given out in front of him. Smell it. I'm looking for the human that wore them, Black Nail explained as the hobgoblins passed the clothes around and sniffed them. I'm going to send a bunch of you to look for him. You want us to explore the city by ourselves? Yes, just stay out of trouble. Sniff around for signs of Avorlus and make sure no humans get a good look at you. If they do then kill them. Come back here when 4 hours pass or if you find Avorlus. All the hobgoblins immediately turned to leave. Most of them were grinning in excitement. This didn't amuse Black Nail. No, not all of you. Some of you have to stay here with me. I will decide who gets to leave. There were moans from the hobgoblins as Black Nail chose 3 to remain behind with him. They watched the others leave with obvious disappointment. Both Hera and Scamp were selected to go hunting. Black Nail had wanted to keep them with him and out of trouble, but they were too skilled not to use. I'm going to find something nice to wear and maybe a new wig. Hera exclaimed as she walked out the door. Scamp was right behind her. I want an entire tray of sausages, the spicy kind. Black Nail scowled after them. He had no way of keeping his minions on track once they left. All he could do was hope they remembered to actually look for Avorlus and not just stuff themselves silly. What are we going to be doing here? One of the remaining hobgoblins asked as he gazed longingly after his more fortunate fellows. Black Nail smiled fiercely as he answered. We're laying a trap. There is no way the people that attacked this place aren't watching it. If we make some noise then someone will come to investigate and we can ask them some questions. A familiar fate too. While he was waiting for his minions to return, Black Nail began laying the groundwork for his next move. The first thing he did was explore Avorlus' mansion more thoroughly. The huge building was full of grandly decorated rooms and lavish furniture, but that didn't interest the hobgoblins. However, they did make some interesting discoveries. The building had a kitchen of course, and so now that most of the others had left, Black Nail and the remaining hobgoblins raided it for snacks. Since it didn't seem like anyone had been around for a few days, most of the food was a little stale, but that didn't matter too much to the hobgoblins. A little age made most human foods taste better anyway. Mold added both color and flavor. After eating their way through the cabinets, the searchers moved on to examine and loot the rest of the place. One of them stumbled upon a hidden doorway in a wall. It opened to reveal a stairway going down, so the searcher immediately ran to fetch Black Nail. Where do you think it goes? He asked when everyone had gathered to study the stairway. To a place that the mage wanted hidden, a place where he keeps his most prized possessions, Black Nail replied. A hidden food store, the hobgoblin guessed as he leaned forward and peered eagerly down the passage. Black Nail shook his head. No, a mage values his magic more than anything else. After a brief search for a torch to light the way, Black Nail led the way down the stairs. There were light crystals on the walls but none of the hobgoblins could activate them, since they didn't have mage blood. Scamp could have done it, so Black Nail sort of regretted sending him away. However, on the other hand, if there was any explosive magic down here then Black Nail didn't want Scamp anywhere near it. Upon reaching the bottom of the stairs, the hobgoblins found themselves in a fair-sized room with rough stone walls. Tables, shelves, and complex-looking contraptions filled the space. Light from the torch Black Nail was holding shone out into the room, but it wasn't strong enough to dispel most of the shadows that filled the chamber's corners. Most evidently of all though, everything reeked of human blood. The smell was practically suffocating. Ew, it smells like a pinky exploded down here, a hobgoblin remarked as his lips curled up in disgust. What are those metal cages for? Another minion asked as he stepped up to examine one of the objects in question. There were 3 empty cages with iron bars up against the nearest wall. They were more than large enough to hold people, and piles of chains lay inside them. Black Nail pinched his nose close. They are for holding people. You can smell it. Oh, we should get one for our base. They seem super useful. Maybe later, Black Nail replied absently as he went to investigate a shelf. The tall wooden shelf contained a lot of the items that Black Nail had come to associate with mages, such as glass bottles and delicate-looking metal tools. All the beakers and vials were empty, though. Judging from all the stained glass shards on the ground, it looked like someone had hastily swept the one that had been full of liquid off the shelf and onto the ground. None of the remaining items were of any use to Black Nail, so he moved on. The table off to one side looked like it had once been covered in piles of papers and books, but now there was only a black stain, fragments of burnt paper, and a small pile of ashes atop it. This bed isn't very comfortable, a hobgoblin remarked. Black Nail looked over to see that the speaker was lying down on a wooden platform in the middle of the room. It was slightly slanted and looked to be adjustable. It also had several straps on its surface, and next to it was a little table that held various small knives, a pair of scissors, and a large saw with jagged teeth. That's because no one lays down on it by choice, Black Nail replied. It's for butchering people. The hobgoblin quickly rolled to his feet and backed away from the table. I didn't think humans ate other humans. Even we don't eat humans. The meat and blood aren't for eating. They are for the mage's experiments. Magic sounds very icky. It is, when it's not exploding, Black Nail replied as it dawned on him that he had no idea what the elixir he drank was actually made out of. It was probably best not to think about it. Further exploration of the room failed to yield any useful discoveries. All the beakers were broken or empty, and there were no monocrystals lying around. There also wasn't a map to a Vorless location sitting out anywhere, which would have been useful. Disappointed, Black Nail headed back up the stairs and into the main part of the mansion. All the other hobgoblins were forced to follow him since he was the one holding the torch. The entire mansion had been completely searched now that the hidden basement had been explored, and Black Nail hadn't found any clues to a Vorless location. That meant he had to go back to his first plan and prepare an ambush. Black Nail had been doing a lot of traveling lately, so he'd had plenty of time to think about a pet project of his, building a better human trap. Now was his opportunity to put his ideas into action. What fun! He couldn't wait to see the look on his prey's faces when the trap was sprung. Right away, Black Nail went about gathering up supplies and materials. He was going to need a lot of rope, some bait, and a large frying pan. Humming with excitement, Black Nail went to work. Once he had the tools he needed, he looked around for the best spot to put his ingenious design together. The key was to think like a human so that you could predict exactly what they were going to do. You had to know what they liked, what they couldn't resist, what they hated, and what they feared. Although, it was almost more useful to know what they didn't fear, since humans seemed terrified of basically everything. Not like hobgoblins, which were only afraid of things that made sense, like giant green things with teeth. There were just an uncomfortably large amount of those in the north. Why are you putting those shiny bits on the ground? One of the hobgoblins asked as Black Nail was working. They are bait. The humans will see them sparkle and investigate, Black Nail explained as he did his best human voice. They will be like, look, silver coins. They are super useful if I want to do pointless human things. I can never have enough money, so I should pick them up and not think at all about how suspicious they are. Is that what a human would really say? It is what they will think as they pick the coins up. That sounds really dumb, but then again they are very shiny. Can I have one? No, these are mine. Get your own. Another hobgoblin walked over. Why don't we just sneak up and grab them when they show up? Black Nail glowered at his minion. This will be safer and more fun. Just shut your jaw and do as I say. We are doing it my way. I'm the leader. When the trap had been set up, Black Nail ordered one of his minions to pull his hood up and go hang around outside the front gate of the complex. He was to stay by the gate and within sight of the street so that he would attract attention, but he was ordered to disappear back inside if the city guard showed up or anyone tried to approach him. Another hobgoblin was to watch from concealment and report everything that happened. Nothing was likely to happen right away, so Black Nail went to stuff his face and take a nap while he waited. All this planning had made him hungry, and the great big bed in a Vorless room was both comfy and empty. Black Nail hadn't quite drifted off yet when he heard the sound of someone approaching. He was curled up atop a pile of blankets and feeling quite comfortable, but he fought off his drowsiness and looked up towards the source of the noise. It was one of his hobgoblin minions, which meant that this probably wasn't an attempt on his life. Although, Black Nail wasn't completely sure since hobgoblins were so deceitful and vicious, except for himself. He was loyal and honest at all times. Even when he lied, he was being honest in spirit, since it was probably for their own good. He was caring like that. A stranger has come, the hobgoblin announced when Black Nail looked his way. A human had arrived to test the trap. Black Nail immediately jumped up and motioned for his minion to lead the way. The hobgoblin nodded and together they raced across the mansion to one of the back doors. They then slipped outside and stalked through the bushes until they were looking out at the front entrance from a concealed position behind a tree. At first Black Nail didn't see anyone, but then he saw motion along the path from the front gate. Someone was creeping carefully along the other side of the hedge, where it would be harder to see them from the house. It was a figure in a long brown cloak. They weren't doing a very good job of moving stealthily, but their jerky, intense movements certainly made them look like they were trying hard at it. From his hiding spot, Black Nail watched the figure get closer with building excitement. He smiled as the man got close enough for him to get a good look at it. It was definitely an unfamiliar human. Under his hood, he had dark eyes that made him look tired and an unshaven face. The man crouched at the edge of the hedge and leaned out to look around. He scanned the front of the house and the nearby greenery, but his eyes slipped right past Black Nail and the hobgoblin beside him. The man obviously wasn't much of a tracker or hunter. When he didn't see anyone else around, the intruder got up and hurried over to the front door. As he was crossing the grounds, he happened to look over to one side and see something on the ground. He stopped and took a quick second to pick up the item that had caught his attention. It was silver coin. Black Nail giggled quietly to himself from his hiding place. Just as he was about to start moving again, the intruder saw another coin in the grass and hesitated. A moment later, he shuffled over to pick up this coin as well. That was when he noticed the open pouch of coins next to a nearby tree. The bag was open so that the coins were clearly visible. The man hesitated again. He looked confused and hesitant as he turned to scan his surroundings, but once again he didn't see anything dangerous, so he shrugged and slipped the coin he was holding into one of his pockets as he moved towards the tree. He took several steps and then his boot hit something. There was a crack as a twig snapped somewhere nearby. The man flinched and stood up straight to look around again, but he didn't see the tripwire he had just set off. The trap was in motion, and a moment later a dark object descended from the leafy branches hanging overhead. The frying pan smashed into the top of the intruder's head. There was a thud and a clank as the iron skillet bounced off bone. The man swayed, regained his balance, and then crumpled bonelessly onto the ground like an empty set of clothes. "Hey, it worked," the hobgoblin next to Black Nail muttered in surprise. "Ha, it worked!" Black Nail shouted excitedly as he burst from concealment. The two hobgoblins then ran over to examine the fallen human. They were quickly joined by several other hobgoblins that had been hiding and watching. Very nice. Good timing. It was a little boring, though. I need to make the next one have more whiz and crack. Some boom wouldn't hurt, Black Nail mused to himself as he examined the remains of the trap. Maybe I can do something with forks. Now what? A minion asked. We bring him inside, put him somewhere nice and comfy, and then threaten to cut him into pieces until he tells me what I want to know. What if he doesn't know anything? Then at least I will have fun. At Black Nail's command, two hobgoblins dragged the unconscious man inside the mansion and plopped him into one of the chairs there. Hobgoblins then tied him to the back of the chair with a loop of rope, while Black Nail grabbed another chair and sat down in front of the captive. When a slap failed to wake the man up, a minion went to fetch a bucket of water. Black Nail made a mental note to maybe use a smaller frying pan next time. Ah, gods above, the man screamed as cold water splashed across his face and soaked into his clothes. He jerked forward but the rope held him down, and his eyes shot wide open but they didn't focus on anything for a few moments. However, when the captive did get a good look at the person seated in front of him his eyes went even wider than before. He gasped and looked terrified out of his mind. Black Nail just smiled and leaned forward so he could meet the man's eyes. Hello. The captive's mouth fell open and he stared back uncomprehendingly. What? I'm the one who is going to be asking the questions, Black Nail replied. You just need to worry about answering them. Hells, what are you? The man gasped in terror. What did I just say? Black Nail replied as he glowered in annoyance. He was really getting sick of how stupid people could be. Maybe a few pokes with a knife would help this human learn. Are you a demon? Am I dead? Black Nail paused and took a moment to think. Yes. Yes, you are. I'm a demon and this is the hells, so there is no point in not answering all my questions. Oh, gods. No, I can't believe it. I prayed to Cor dies constantly and tried not to commit too many crimes a day. How could this happen to me? Believe it. Now answer my questions, Black Nail hissed as he raised a dagger threateningly. That seemed like fairly demon-like behavior to him. The man immediately began spilling his guts. In fact, he was talking way too much. Black Nail didn't really care about his reasons for sleeping with his neighbor's wife or that time he had stolen his brother's golden ring and sold it. Focus on the stuff that happened right before you, died, Black Nail told him. The frantic man quickly began explaining about how he'd been hired to watch the house for signs of activity by a group of men who had assaulted it a few days earlier. Who were they? They didn't tell me, foul one. I was just paid to help them find the place, but they must have been from a mage guild. They were too organized and packing too much magic for them to be anyone else. I have no idea which one. Please don't devour my soul. Black Nail really didn't like being called foul by a smelly human, but that wasn't important right now. He had heard of the mage guilds many times, although he knew little about them, except they were a group of powerful mages. Mahedium had been on the run from them, and now it seemed like they were after Avorlus. What did they want with Avorlus? Black Nail asked his mortally confused captive. I don't know, Great Defiler. I just know they wanted him alive. That was interesting, and good news. It meant there was a solid chance Avorlus was still alive. Black Nail asked the man a few more questions but didn't get any more interesting information out of him, except for the location of what the captive swore was the best cheese shop in the city. Since the man was no longer of any use, Black Nail got up, walked around, and cut his throat from behind. He did it without warning so that the man barely had time to react. One moment he was whining about how he'd been forced to kill that dog because it wouldn't shut up, and then the next he was choking on his own blood. The frothy gurgling was much more pleasant to listen to. Alive, the man would undoubtedly have tried to warn his companions about the hobgoblin's presence, and Black Nail had no way of stopping him. 2 hobgoblins then carried the man's body over to the deep pit in the hallway and dropped it down into the dark. Black Nail didn't want to leave Avorla's house a mess. He was a guest here after all. Before Black Nail could wander back to the bedroom and start napping again, a hobgoblin ran over with news. One of the scouts has returned, boss, the excited minion reported. He found the mage you are looking for, but so have the people that attacked this place. It looks like there is about to be a big fight. A familiar fate 3. The 4 hours Black Nail had given his scouts were almost up, and it was time for them to return from their hunt, so Black Nail decided to wait a few minutes before heading off to track down Avorlas. The scout that had found him needed a moment to catch his breath anyway, and some of the minions that had stayed at the mansion had wandered off and needed to be rounded up. After stretching and yawning to shake off the effects of his nap, Black Nail sent out word for everyone to meet at the main foyer. There, they began preparing to head out, while they waited for the laggards to arrive. Equipment needed to be sorted, disguises had to be fixed, and loot had to be stashed away. It didn't take long for the scouts that had been sent out to start coming back. The first hobgoblin that arrived walked through the front door and reported that he hadn't found anything of interest. However, Black Nail couldn't help but notice that his clothes were absolutely covered in blood that smelled suspiciously human. What happened to you? Black Nail asked. I tripped, the hobgoblin replied meekly as he turned to avoid meeting Black Nail's eyes. Into a giant puddle of human blood. Yes. That. Before Black Nail could question him more about how the puddle had gotten there in the first place, he was distracted by the arrival of another scout. This one had something sitting on its shoulders. It was a human, a very small one. The little brown-haired child laughed as he threw his hand up into the air. He was dressed in fine-looking clothes and didn't seem put off by the presence of all the hobgoblins at all, least of all the one he was riding. Black Nail stared. What is that? I found it behind a house. Can I keep it? Green men, the child giggled as it stuck its tongue out at Black Nail. No, you can't keep it. I already have to deal with too many small useless critters, and that thing can't even feed itself. It could take over a year to properly train it. Black Nail growled angrily. He had no idea how long it took human children to grow up, or how old this child was. He just knew they matured slower than goblins, so it took around 6 years, maybe. I know it's pink and ugly, but look at its chubby face and big cute eyes. Don't you just want to give it treats and pat its head, the hobgoblin explained as he set the child down. No, take it back, right now. Angry green man, the child laughed. I promise to feed it and train it to do chores. No. I don't have time for this. Go return it. You can catch up to us later. The hobgoblin scout replied sadly as he turned to leave the mansion and do as he was told. The arrival of Hera and Scamp was quite plain by comparison. They were merely pushing a wheelbarrow full of junk and food between them. Did you even look for the mage? Black Nail asked them. He was not amused. It seemed like most his scouts had simply been slaking off. It was a miracle that one of them had actually stumbled onto Avorla's path. Sure, he wasn't in any of the sausage shops we went to, Scamp replied as he stopped pushing the wheelbarrow and let go of it. Why would he be in a sausage shop? That's where I would be. Black Nail glared at Scamp. Once they got out of the city, the hobgoblin was going to be given an endless stream of chores to do, or get stabbed to death. Either one would be fine. I looked for the mage. I'd do anything for you, Hera interjected as she approached. As you should. I'm the leader, Black Nail replied absently as he stepped out of the way of her attempt to lean against him. At this point, it was second nature to him. I also have cheese. Hera said as she presented him with a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Black Nail quickly snatched the present from her and sniffed it. It was cheese, all right. It wasn't the best type, but it was far from the worst as well. You're my new favorite, Black Nail told her approvingly. Does that mean I get a hug? No, not at all, Black Nail replied as he eyed her suspiciously. He knew she wanted to mate with him, but why did she want to hug him? Was she trying to trick him somehow? When everyone had gathered and gotten ready, the scout who had located Avorlas led the way back out into the city. The hobgoblins quickly left the central district and made their way into the outer parts of Dagger Point, where everything was dirtier and more cramped. It was beginning to get dark out as the day grew old, and the sun was now touching the western horizon. The streets had become less crowded as shops closed and the shadows had lengthened. This made it easier for Black Nail's party to move through Dagger Point without drawing too much attention. They passed through the residential area, walked past streets full of shops, and exited an alley to emerge among rows of derelict-looking warehouses. There was no one in sight but the occasional rustle or clank could be heard from down a dark alley. It was probably just rats, or orphans. They were pretty much the same thing anyway. That's the place there, the hobgoblin scout said as he peered out from behind the corner of a building and pointed to a warehouse. Black Nail joined him and leaned around the corner as well. All the other hobgoblins were behind him. You followed the scent here. I found the mage's trail in a nearby alley and it led me here, boss. There are men guarding the entrances so I went back to get you. And the enemy? The hunters. They are in the buildings around us. The watch and wait. For what? I don't know. They probably want to move in darkness. Even in Dagger Point people would notice a small battle and come see what was happening, Black Nail mused to himself as he scanned the nearby windows for signs of watchers. What do you want to do, boss? Scamp asked. We will sneak in and try to find Murderous. There is no way some lazy city humans will see us, Black Nail answered haughtily as he turned to face his minions and rubbed his hands together in glee. This shouldn't be too hard. Before anyone could reply, there was a loud boom. The orange light of untamed flames shredded the nearby shadows. The unmistakable crack and thud of flying masonry filled the air and all the hobgoblins flinched. One of the walls of a Murderous hideout had just exploded, and there was a cacophony of excited shouts from within. Black Nail leaned back around the corner and frowned in annoyance. As he watched, a squad of armored human warriors stormed out of a door across the street and ran toward the action. Their leader was very clearly holding a mage staff, and as soon as they had disappeared into a side street there was another explosion. Or we could wait here and see what happens, Black Nail told his minions. This didn't seem like a situation he wanted to get involved in. Great idea, boss. Scamp agreed as the other hobgoblins nodded. You are so wise, Hera added fawningly as she fluttered her eyelashes his way. There was another explosion, and then a body flew out of a second-story window and smacked into the street below. It slid briefly across the cobblestones before coming to a stop. A few moments later, a new squad of armored soldiers marched out of an alley and took up position in front of the door of a Murderous warehouse. They ignored the corpse that lay by their feet. Wow, the humans in this city sure have a lot of fun, Scamp remarked in surprise. Flames were now leaping out of some of the first-story windows. A burning man threw himself out of one of them and began thrashing around on the ground. He screamed for a few seconds before one of the soldiers walked over and silenced him with a stab of his sword. Several minutes passed as the hobgoblins in the shadows watched the building burn. Black Nail took the time to try and come up with a new plan, but nothing came to mind that didn't end with him staring down the business end of a mage's staff. Then, there was a crash, and several figures stepped out of the warehouse's front door. By the light of the fire, they were recognizable as the attacking soldiers that had entered the warehouse before. Their leader with the mage staff was still with them. More importantly, two of soldiers were carrying a limb body between them. Black Nail studied the figure and saw the familiar figure of a white-haired old man. It was Murderous. That's him, our quarry, Black Nail hissed as he pointed at the unconscious mage. It seems like these humans got him first, Scamp replied. Too bad, let's go home, another hobgoblin added. He seemed a little frightened by all the mayhem, so Black Nail stomped on his foot and gave him a hard stare to remind him of who he should really be afraid of. The two groups of soldiers had now merged and Murderous was right in the very middle of them. Suddenly, two men in the dark uniforms of Murderous bodyguards rushed out of the front door of the warehouse. It wasn't clear if they were chasing after their master or just trying to escape the flames. They had swords in hand, and like all of the rogue mage's men, they were heavy-set and tough-looking. Murderous also had a habit of making his guards into vessels, since that was his magical specialty. The leader of the soldiers saw the guards emerge from the building, and he raised his staff. As soon as it was pointed in their direction, a blast of force shot out and slammed into the closest guard. There was a crash as he was sent flying back through the door and into the building. Before the other bodyguard could even react, a second blast smashed into him. He was also blown backwards, but instead of going back through the door, there was a loud splat as he hit the wall. The leader of the attackers then studied the building for a few seconds, before flipping his staff around. He fiddled with the knobs on the side, and then he pointed it back at the building. A heavy boom shook the air as a green ball of energy slammed into the building. It flew in through a window and exploded within the building, causing the earth to shake slightly. However, the mage didn't stop there. He fired 3 more times. The walls of the building began warping and then the entire warehouse collapsed into a pile of burning rubble. A second mage with a staff then stepped forward and began spraying the remains with a stream of water. The water hissed and steamed as it hit the flames and hot stones. It didn't take long for all the visible fires to be put out. Let's not fight them, Hera suggested. She sounded impressed, and Black Nail didn't blame her. This was easily one of the greatest displays of magic he had ever seen. Usually mages held back more. With the building completely destroyed, the soldiers started marching away down the street. They moved quickly, as if they were in a hurry, and Black Nail could guess why. They hadn't exactly been subtle during their attack. Even this late, people would be coming to investigate all the noise they had just made. There were probably already some unwanted eyes around. We are following them. Be sneaky and stay out of sight, Black Nail hissed at his minions as he stepped out on the street and began stalking after the soldiers. You don't have to tell me that, a hobgoblin whispered as he began tiptoeing after Black Nail. I'm going to be sneakier than ever, so I don't end up going splat against a wall. The other hobgoblins then followed, if somewhat reluctantly. It was night now, and a slim crescent moon was visible in the sky overhead. Without the firelight, it was dark and hard to see out, although there were still some light streaming from windows. Dagger Point was a large city, and some streets were lit and still occupied, but the soldiers avoided them. The rooftops started pressing closer together as the group Black Nail was following headed into a lower-end residential district. To get a better view, Black Nail jumped onto a pile of barrels and climbed up the side of a building. He pulled himself onto the clay tile roof and then continued after his prey. The soldiers traveled down several dark streets and more than a few tight alleyways, as Black Nail stalked them from above. The soldiers had a rear guard that was watching their retreat, but none of them looked up for pursuers, which was a common human failing. As his minions followed below, Black Nail leaped from one roof to another. He landed softly with almost no noise, and then he scrambled after his quarry. He caught up to them and stopped to watch from behind a chimney as they suddenly came to a stop outside a large shop. It was a large two-story building along a fairly prosperous-looking street, although there was no one out at this time of night. The door of the shop was opened by someone within and then the soldiers hurried inside with Vorlus. Below Black Nail, his hobgoblin minions arrived and took up position in the shadows of a tight alleyway. They waited for his orders as he studied the building. Inside, a light flared into existence, but the windows were shuttered so nothing was visible inside. After a few moments of thinking, Black Nail scrambled down the side of the building to join his minions in the alleyway. "What now, boss?" Scamp whispered. "Now we prepare to move," Black Nail replied quietly. "These humans are very organized and this is their base. There will be sentries all around here. Check the nearby buildings and streets. I want every one of them found and watched." "Can we kill them?" another hobgoblin asked eagerly. "Not yet," Black Nail answered. This didn't please many of his minions, but they knew better than to complain. "It's a night hunt," Hera remarked as she smiled. She didn't seem too disappointed. "Yes, and it will be easy. Humans can barely function in the dark," Scamp bragged. As they broke up into smaller groups and headed out, the hobgoblins began betting with each other about who would find the most sentries. They were far more eager for action now that there was little chance of a face-to-face fight breaking out, and hobgoblins loved to hunt, even when it didn't immediately end in blood. Black Nail left 2 minions behind to watch the front door and then took another with him as he circled around to find the back entrance. If anyone left the shop he wanted to make absolutely sure he knew about it. Once he'd found a comfortable spot on a nearby rooftop to watch from, he settled in to wait. Now was not the time to act. It was best to let the humans relax their guard, and then strike when they were unprepared. The guild wanted Vorlus alive, and he had been unconscious when he'd been captured, so that meant Black Nail had time. Midnight came and went as Black Nail waited with the patient focus of a predator. The night grew pitch black and then began to lighten, as hobgoblins reported into their leader and then went back out to scout or watch their quarry. Several enemy sentries had indeed been found and easily evaded. Several humans slipped into and out of the shop, but none of them were Vorlus. As the very first rays of the sun began to shine out from behind the horizon, Black Nail decided it was time to move. "Now, tell the others to take out all the sentries and then report back here," he told 2 of his minions that were behind him. They nodded and ran off to spread the word. Soon, grinning hobgoblins began arriving as Black Nail's forces gathered. Several of them already smelled of blood from taking out the enemy sentries. "All the watching humans are dead?" Black Nail asked. "Except the 2 in the shop that are watching the streets from windows," Scamp replied. "Then we take them out now, at the same time I go in to find Vorlus." "Whatever you want, boss." "Exactly," Black Nail hissed in reply. "I'm the leader, and if you follow my orders then we will get what we came for without a problem." At Black Nail's command, Scamp led a small group of hobgoblins over to scale the front of the building and take out the sentry that was posted at the window there. Black Nail took 3 helpers and went to do the same to the sentry at the side window. After descending to the ground, he crept through the shadows and towards the shop. When he got to the wall, he reached up and began scaling it by grabbing the rough stonework. Soon, he was dangling just beneath the windowsill. He waited there until he heard a quiet whistle from below. That was the signal. The sentry was alone and had turned away from the window. Grinning, Black Nail reached up and then pulled himself up onto the window. His strong, light, and agile body allowed him to move with both ease and in complete silence. There was a small sitting room in front of Black Nail. It was barely lit by a single small lamp off in a far corner. The sentry was an armored soldier and had walked away from the window so he could grab a bite of food from a tray on a table off to one side. There was only about 7 feet between him and Black Nail, and he seemed completely unaware of the fact that he wasn't alone anymore. In one smooth motion, Black Nail drew a long dagger and leapt towards the man's back. He sailed through the air like an errant shadow, and as he landed on his target, he pulled the man's head back and reached around to cut his throat. The dagger sliced effortlessly through the flesh, and then Black Nail pulled the man down to the ground and stabbed him under the ribs for good measure. Blood spilled out of the wounds as Black Nail pinned the sentry against the floor. He died a few seconds later without ever managing to put up a fight, or even get a look at his attacker. His prey slain, Black Nail stood back up and grinned viciously at nothing in particular. He was practically vibrating with bloodlust, but he suppressed it as he walked over to the window and signaled for his minions to climb up. They were in. Now they just needed to find Vorlus without alerting the mages. A familiar fate for. After taking a second to listen and make sure that no one was hanging out in the hallway, Black Nail crept out of the room where he had just killed the sentry. 2 hobgoblin minions followed after him, and 1 remained behind to serve as a lookout. He had been ordered to imitate the sentry if anyone came looking, kill any humans that weren't fooled, and whistle sharply if he was found out. That would be Black Nail's cue to break for the closest exit. Having followed the guild soldiers that had abducted him, Black Nail knew that Vorlus was somewhere in this building, and he needed to find the mage without being detected by those same soldiers. Black Nail doubted he could fight his way to the mage. There were dozens of heavily armed human soldiers inside and at least 2 combat mages as well. Black Nail had just seen a demonstration of the firepower those combat mages wielded, and he had no desire to go head-to-head with them. On top of their unbelievable power, mages could be very tricky. They didn't play by the same rules as other people, and Black Nail had no idea what the rules of magic were. It might be a good idea to learn sometime. He would have to remember to ask. A long carpet stretched down the hallway and muffled the sound of the hobgoblin's steps. One end of the hallway ended at a door, and at the other end was a staircase that led down. Black Nail headed for the stairs. As he walked, he heard voices from behind the closed door of one of the adjacent rooms. With the target captured, we should head back at first light, a man said. It might be better to interrogate him here, someone else replied. Black Nail grinned in relief as he walked past the door. It sounded like Avorlus was still alive. He had been fairly sure that the guild wouldn't kill him yet, but not completely certain. Humans could be unpredictable in their stupidity. When he reached the stairs, Black Nail took a moment to sniff around. He didn't detect any signs of Avorlus, and this seemed like the only way up to the second floor. That meant that Avorlus wasn't up here. Cautiously, Black Nail leaned over and peeked at the floor below. It was another empty hallway, although this one was much better lit, so with his minions in tow, Black Nail got up and carefully crept down the stairs. The steps creaked a bit, but no one showed up to check out the noise. The hallway at the bottom branched off in several directions. Black Nail walked forward a bit and peered down a side passage. He was immediately greeted by the sight of the front door. 2 enemy soldiers in chainmail were guarding it. Since there was nothing for him there, Black Nail waited until he was sure they were both looking away, and then he and his followers slipped past the doorway and further down the hallway. The scent of Avorlus reached Black Nail's nose as he moved deeper into the building. The rogue mage had been brought in through the front door and then been carried this way. There was a door to Black Nail's right, and it was hanging slightly open. A quick look inside revealed a large dark room that was full of people. Black Nail had found most of the soldiers, but they weren't currently a threat. Most of them looked to be asleep on makeshift hammocks or the floor. The room was obviously an impromptu barracks, and judging by the smell, Avorlus wasn't inside. Moving on, the hobgoblins passed several closed doors, but none of them were the way Avorlus had gone. Suddenly, Black Nail heard the creak of floorboards from behind him. He froze. Someone was about to walk out into the hallway, and there was no way he would miss the hobgoblins there. Quickly, Black Nail tested the closest door. It opened to reveal a linen closet. Black Nail wasted no time, and jumped inside. His 2 minions were right behind him, and the door snapped shut after them. No one moved or spoke for several long moments as the hobgoblins waited in the darkness of the closet for the sound of footsteps to pass, but then Black Nail spoke up. "Get your foot away from my nose. You're crushing it," he hissed as he stared at the offending hobgoblin's boot, or at least he was fairly sure that it was a boot that was pressed up against his face. It was difficult to see in the gloom. The closet was rather small and the hobgoblins had been in a hurry when they had jumped inside, so they had ended up bunched together in a messy ball of awkwardly placed limbs. There was a grunt of exertion as someone tried to wiggle around, but then it stopped. "Sorry, boss. I can't move." Black Nail hissed and tried to get free, but one of his arms was jammed between someone's legs and both his feet were immobile as well. "I'm stuck too," the other minion added unhelpfully. Annoyed, Black Nail kicked someone in the stomach. He wasn't sure who, but both his minions deserved it, so it didn't really matter. A few moments later, and after a bit of trial and error, the hobgoblins managed to roll themselves out of the closet by shifting their weight all at once. They fell apart once they were free, and Black Nail climbed to his feet. He really wanted to smack his stupid minions around, but now wasn't the time. He needed their help to complete the mission. After that he could smack all he wanted. A turn in the hallway revealed another staircase that led downward. A quick sniff around proved that Avorlus had definitely been carried down them, so Black Nail followed after him. These stairs were less creaky, which was good because the basement wasn't empty. A quick glance around revealed that there were 2 guards standing next to a door across the room. Black Nail studied the 2 soldiers carefully for a few seconds, and then when he was sure they weren't looking his way, he dropped down the stairs then rolled to the side in one smooth motion. The basement room below was full of crates and barrels, and Black Nail came to stop behind a trio of barrels that concealed him from the guard's view. The entire chamber was obviously used for storage. It was lit by a series of oil lamps on the walls, but the room was far from bright. The piles of materials cast shadows everywhere, and there was a draft in the room that was causing some of the lamps to flicker ever so slightly. Black Nail was quickly joined by his 2 followers, as they copied the maneuver he had used to descend the stairs. One of the hobgoblins opened his mouth to say something, but Black Nail shushed him. The storage room had a stone floor and stone walls, so echoes could be unpredictable and any speech might alert the guards no matter how quiet it was. Black Nail signaled to his minions using hand gestures that he wanted them to follow, and then he started moving. He dashed out from behind the barrels and over to a pile of crates. From there, he crawled across the ground until he reached another bunch of barrels, and then he peeked out to look around. The guards didn't react at all. They hadn't seen him or heard anything suspicious yet. There was a problem, though. The doorway the soldiers were guarding had a large open space around it, and there was no way the guards wouldn't see anyone approaching. Thus, a more complex plan was needed. Black Nail withdrew a pair of small round stones from a pouch on his waist. He then explained the general outline of his plan to his minions using hand signals. Once they got the idea, Black Nail tossed a rock. It flew close to the ground before hitting a crate on the far side of the room. There was a thud as it bounced off the wood and then clattered noisily against the stones of the floor. "What was that?" one of the guards asked as he looked over towards the noise. The other man shrugged. "It was probably a rat or something. I'm sure there are heaps of the nasty beasts in this disgusting excuse for a city. I can't wait to leave this crap hole behind. I'm going to check it out." "Why? We're not here to protect some merchant stock from vermin. Our orders are to make sure the prisoner doesn't go anywhere." "I know, but I still want to check it out. The rats get huge in these parts, and it might be something else," the first guard said as he stared suspiciously at the source of the noise. "Like what? A goblin? I think the rat would be more dangerous." I won't know until I look, but with a blood mage having been loose in this city for years I don't want to take any chances. This argument seemed to resonate with the second guard. He grimaced sourly. God's forsaken blood mages. We should have already killed this one. They are vile. Not our call, the first man replied as he walked carefully away from the door and toward the pile of crates the noise had come from. He had a wary hand placed on the sword hilt at his waist. His companion watched him move forward, and thus they were both looking directly away from the hobgoblin's position. Black Nail flashed his minions the go signal and then launched himself into action. He jumped over the crates he was hiding behind, and when his boots hit the basement floor he was already sprinting forward. As Black Nail dashed towards the guard at the door, he pulled his sword loose. Both men were still looking the other way so they saw nothing, but the guard by the door heard something and turned to look Black Nail's way. He froze for a second at the sight of 3 running hobgoblins and didn't seem to know what to do, as if he doubted his eyes. A brief instant later, he opened his mouth to shout something, but Black Nail had already closed the distance between them. His sword sliced through the air and towards his target's neck. What? The guard gasped as he managed to jump backwards out of the way of the attack. However, the hurried action left him off balance. Black Nail adjusted his stance and turned his slash into a thrust. The tip of his blade cut into the man's throat and silenced him. However, the brief scuffle had made more than enough noise to draw the attention of the second guard. He turned to see what was going on, only to be tackled by the other 2 hobgoblins. Their momentum sent him sprawling over sideways, and there was a loud crack as his helmeted head smacked against the stone floor. The blow stunned the guard for a moment, and that was all the time the hobgoblins needed. Knives appeared in their hands and almost instantly sank deep into his exposed flesh. He was dead within seconds, without having managed to shout or give any warning. The man Black Nail had stabbed in the neck was also no longer among the living. Blood was slowly seeping out of the guards' bodies as Black Nail walked over the corpse in front of him and inspected the door. It was a thick wooden barrier with a cast iron doorknob and keyhole. He turned the handle, but it didn't budge. It was locked. Look for a key, he ordered his minions as he turned to look at them. Almost immediately one of the hobgoblins held up a thick iron key and gave Black Nail a happy grin. Since they had started looting the fallen guard's body the second it had hit the floor, it hadn't taken them long to find it. Black Nail took the key and inserted it into the lock. Watch this carefully. It is very difficult and you may need to explain it to the others, he explained as he showed the watching hobgoblins how to unlock a door. And that means it will open now, one of the minions asked as the lock clicked. Black Nail turned the handle again and pushed the door open ever so slightly before responding. Yes, but you need the right key. They are not all the same. A push caused the door to swing fully open, and the hobgoblins were greeted by the sight of a small windowless room that had been completely dark until the door had been opened. In the center of the room was a small table that was just big enough to sit 2 people, and there were in fact 2 chairs on opposite sides of it, and in one of those chairs was a Vorless. The mage was tied to the back of the seat and there was a cloth gag stuffed into his mouth. Black Nail could hear the mage breathing ever so quietly, but he didn't move or look up at the intrusion into his chamber. He seemed to still be unconscious. This human smells like the person we are looking for, one of the minions remarked as they all walked into the room. It's him. He is the mage I'm hunting, Black Nail answered as he smirked triumphantly. He had found the maker of elixirs. Now he just had to get out of here with him intact. At Black Nail's order, one hobgoblin grabbed a Vorless feet and the other grabbed his torso. They then flipped him into their shoulders where they could carry him with ease. The jostling failed to wake him up, but there didn't seem to be anything wrong with him. Can we leave now? One of the hobgoblins asked. Yes, let's do that, Black Nail replied. He didn't feel the need to stick around either. With Black Nail in the lead and their cargo safely acquired, the hobgoblins hurried back out of the side room and then over to the stairs. Black Nail went up first to make sure the hallway was empty, and then they rushed through the building and upstairs. Who is that? I hear a lot of movement, one of the guards at the entrance asked after the hobgoblins had run past. The hobgoblins ignored them as they raced through the upstairs hallway to the room where they had entered. The sentry they had left behind was waiting for them there, and the shop was coming alive behind them. They didn't have much time before someone investigated this room. A lot of people were now moving down below and talking amongst themselves. The hornet nest had been well and truly kicked now, so Black Nail wasted no time. He leaned out the window and whistled. Right away, several hobgoblins stepped out of the shadows on the street below. Catch the human, he told them as he signaled the minions behind him forward. The 2 hobgoblins holding a Vorless immediately dumped the unconscious mage out of the window. He plummeted down to the ground, but right before he hit, 3 hobgoblins managed to dive forward and catch him. Good work. Black Nail laughed as he jumped out the window. He landed on the cobblestones below feet first and then rolled to reduce his impact. Without waiting for orders, the hobgoblins still up in the room jumped out after him as well. They were just in time. Light flared out of the second-story window as someone with a lamp or lightstone stormed into the room. Someone just jumped out the window. They're on the street below, an irate-sounding woman yelled from up above. Run, and don't forget the mage. Black Nail shouted as he followed his own advice. He took off at a sprint away from the shop and deeper into the twisting alleys of Dagger Point. His minions, including 2 that had picked up a Vorless, were right behind him. Together, they slipped away into the shadows as the front entrance to the shop burst open and human soldiers began pouring out. Don't let them get away, someone roared. Black Nail laughed gleefully as he turned a street corner. The sound echoed off the buildings and back toward the shop, where it undoubtedly reached the ears of the guild soldiers. There was no way any humans were going to catch him now. It was still so early in the morning that it was dark out, and he had too much of a head start. Avorlus was his, and that meant that the power at Black Nail's fingertips would soon grow stronger than ever, and power was meant to be used. A familiar fate 5. The hobgoblins under Black Nail's command carried Avorlus through the back alleys of Dagger Point. At first they heard shouts and the stomp of boots as guild soldiers tried to follow them, but they soon lost any sign of pursuit. Black Nail led the way out of the merchant quarter and into a rundown residential section. The slum streets were narrow and dirty, and many of the small homes here were obviously derelict. Dagger Point had a huge human population, but it wasn't overflowing with people. It seemed like its population had shrunk over time, although Black Nail had no idea why. It wasn't the sort of thing that he usually thought about, but as he led his minions past an old abandoned wagon that was missing a wheel, several notions flashed through his mind. Maybe it was because the city humans had gotten lazy and couldn't protect themselves from the beasts in the forest anymore? The sun was coming up, so before too many people started taking to the streets, Black Nail chose an isolated building on an empty block. The door had fallen off so the hobgoblins just marched inside. The small home had been stripped clean of furniture and was obviously water damaged because of a leak in the ceiling. It also didn't smell great inside, but this was Dagger Point, so that wasn't a surprise. Black Nail expected that some of his hobgoblin minions would suffer permanent damage to their ability to smell before they left, especially if they kept sniffing spices. Once Avorlus had been thrown inside, Black Nail got his minions busy doing work. He needed some items, and he wasn't going to go get them himself. That wasn't what leaders did. Minions were also sent out to form a perimeter. If the guild soldiers showed up anywhere nearby, Black Nail wanted to know about it, before they started raining down fire and blowing up buildings. Those hobgoblins that had good disguises and half-decent acting skills were also given orders to gently but firmly send away any approaching citizens, under threat of pain and death. Soon, the hobgoblins had acquired most of the things Black Nail wanted. A blanket was hung over the door, 2 simple wooden chairs were acquired from nearby, and someone fetched a bucket of water. Black Nail took a seat in one chair while 2 of his minions picked Avorlus off the ground and sat him down in the other. A third minion then dumped the bucket of water over Avorlus' face, while the other hobgoblins stood back behind him. As the water washed over him and then splashed down onto the floor, the mage came awake. It had been very cold water, and it got a strong reaction. Avorlus' eyes snapped open and he jerked forward in what looked like an attempt to stand. However, he was still tied up and a hobgoblin was standing behind him and holding him in place, so he didn't get very far. All Avorlus could do was flop back onto the chair and look around. There wasn't much to see in the dark room, so he quickly noticed Black Nail sitting in front of him. His eyes narrowed as he stared hatefully at the form before him. "You may as well kill me. I won't tell you anything. You have no right to the secrets I have discovered. You are parasites and vermin that feed upon the wonders of magic. You guilds exist only to stifle the works of your betters and hoard power you don't deserve," he cursed. "One day real seekers of knowledge will rise up and destroy you." "What?" Black Nail considered his words for a moment before carefully replying. "I think you're confused. I'm obviously not with the guilds." "You're not?" Avorlus remarked in surprise as he stared at Black Nail. He seemed to be having trouble seeing. "No, I'm a hobgoblin. I don't think your mage guilds have many of us." Avorlus froze and one of his eyes twitched. "What?" "I'm green and I have pointy ears," Black Nail explained as he pointed to the tips of his ears. "Oh, it's dark in here and my vision is still a little blurry. I think someone bashed me over the head." Black Nail looked around. It was fairly dark in here. He had forgotten how bad human eyesight could be in dim lighting. "I can help you with the light," Black Nail replied as he motioned for a minion to go remove the blanket from the door. He had just put it there to make sure no one could see inside, but it probably wasn't necessary. With the sheet gone, a lot more light streamed into the room. Avorlus looked around and gulped nervously. He didn't seem all that happy to be out of the clutches of the guild. "I see that you're all hobgoblins. That's interesting. I'm the leader," Black Nail told him. It was important that everyone knew that. Suddenly, Avorlus sat up straighter and his eye narrowed in understanding as a realization hit him. "You must be that hobgoblin of Mahedium's. I can't think of any other reason you would want to abduct me, and I don't know of any other hobgoblin that can talk and such." "I can talk just fine," Scamp interjected, before Black Nail shut him up with angry look. Black Nail then turned back to Avorlus and hissed angrily. "I never served that traitor. I was Herod's favorite." A neutral expression overcame Avorlus' face and he leaned back. "Ah, sorry. That was a slip of the tongue. I apologize. Don't do it again." "I won't. Do you mind answering some questions? Like where am I and how I got here? I must admit to being rather confused." "The last thing I remember is the guild assault on my hideout," Avorlus asked in a careful tone. "I rescued you from those guild people after they had caught you. Now, we are hiding in Dagger Point." "Ah, and why did you do that?" "Because we're friends," Black Nail explained as he smiled cheerfully. "You helped Herod and me out before, so I helped you. So you're going to let me leave?" "Of course, but as your friend and ally I can't let you walk back into danger. That's not what a true friend would do." "I see, so if I said I would like to meet with some people? Too dangerous. Those guild soldiers could be anywhere. And if I said I wanted to join a caravan leaving the city? Too dangerous. So I'm your prisoner," Avorlus stated flatly. "No, that's silly. I'm just going to send you to a safe place where the bad guild people won't be able to find you. As your friend, it is the least I can do." "I can't say I like this development all that much," but at least it seems like I'm not going to be tortured to death today. That's an improvement anyway. Everything becomes better when I show up. Black Nail agreed. Avorlus sighed. I've avoided the guild and becoming anyone's servant for almost 40 years, and now this. I've lost everything and been kidnapped by primitives. Not kidnapped, I liberated you. Black Nail replied. He was mildly annoyed that Avorlus wasn't understanding the difference. Well, if you want me to stay that way, there is something you should know. The guild will probably be able to track my location using magic, so we need to get moving right away. How will they do that? Black Nail had never heard of magic that could be used to find things. That was what noses were for. My attackers had ample opportunity to collect some of my blood, and I undoubtedly bled somewhere they can access. With that and the right mana stone they can make a blood compass, which will point in my direction. The technique is common among guild hunters. That's not good, Black Nail remarked as he began to think. If it pointed in Avorlus' direction. The city isn't safe. It's too easy to sneak up and surround us. I will have to send you out into the green. You want to send me out into the forest? Avorlus asked in alarm. The green is full of dangerous beasts and who knows what other terrors. It will be safer for you there. My minions live out there and know how to survive, unlike the men chasing you. You will be fine. You have a point, Avorlus remarked reluctantly. I have several, and I keep them sharp, Black Nail replied as he stroked the hilt of a dagger at his waist. It was one of his favorites. I don't doubt that, Avorlus said as he frowned thoughtfully and looked up. I'm more curious about what you want with me, though. What is it that you're up to and how can I help you with it? Last I heard, Herad was dead and her forces had been scattered. Black Nail met Avorlus' gaze with a steely look of his own. I want to kill those that destroyed my old tribe, including the traitor Mahedium. You know how to make my elixir, and I need more of it, lots more of it. I suppose I don't mind helping you with that. It's actually in my own interest, although I clearly don't have much choice, Avorlus huffed as he looked down at the ropes encircling his torso. The timing of the fiery eye's sudden interest in me is highly suspicious. I'd just turned down an invite from Mahedium and his backers. They wanted me to join them in creating a sort of secret guild that answered to them. I said no, I serve no one but myself, and then all sorts of troubles began cropping up to hinder me. They weren't subtle, but they were obviously too afraid to face me and my allies here in Dagger Point directly, so I underestimated how far they would go to monopolize magical knowledge in the north. Our enemies are the same, Black Nail agreed. Mahedium betrayed Herad so that he could join up with the wolf. And the merchants that support the wolf, the Broken Wheel. Yes, them. They were the ones that gave the wolf's minions gold when Herad was here in Dagger Point. They used it to buy troops. They've done a lot more than that. The Broken Wheel and Warwick control everything in the north now, either directly or from behind the scenes. These are very powerful people that you've decided to raise your blade against. What makes you think you stand a chance? I have my minions here, and many more of them as well. You will need more than hobgoblins. I have a lot of human minions, and a vast territory I control, Black Nail bragged. It wasn't his fault that most of the humans that worked for him were too stupid to realize that they did, and he did control a vast territory, even if it was almost all empty forest on the edge of the frontier that no one else wanted. But do you have somewhere that I can do my work safely? Yes, I even have a minion that knows many of Mahedium's secrets. He makes crystals for me. Do you now? Avorlus replied with obvious interest. Yes, I do, Black Nail told him. Avorlus would undoubtedly be surprised when he learned who Black Nail was talking about, but it was the truth. Avorlus grinned. It seems we can help each other. I'm curious about something, though. When you liberated me, did the hunters ever see your faces? I think so. They probably saw something. We had to kill a few of them. Why do you want to know? Black Nail asked. Was this a bad magic thing? Could they be tracked somehow? Avorlus smirked evilly. No real reason. I just wish I could see the look on their superior's face when they hand that report in. If Avorlus was telling the truth about the blood compass, then unwanted company was probably going to arrive soon, so Black Nail ordered several of his minions to take the mage out into the forest right away. They had a campsite out in the green nearby that they had used on the way here, and it would be impossible for the guild to get close to it without being seen. You're not coming with us, boss? Scamp asked. He had been selected to lead Avorlus guards, because Black Nail didn't want him around. Black Nail grimaced. No, I have to meet with a human, a very dangerous one. Oh, they must be very super scary, Hera remarked in surprise. She had also been personally selected to guard the mage. Black Nail had a strong feeling that things would be much simpler if she were out of the way for this next part, and he trusted his instincts. They are. Be very grateful you don't have to meet them, Black Nail replied as he sent his minions on their way. When they were gone, Black Nail sighed and rubbed his eyes. He had been putting this part of his mission off, but he didn't have any more excuses. He needed information on Warwick and this Broken Wheel Company. More than that, he needed to understand a lot of things about human, their society, and their lands that were mysteries to him right now. Such things hadn't concerned him before, but ever since the battle at Shelter he had come to realize how ignorant he was. That had to change. Black Nail hissed in frustration. As much as he wished that he could just attack some random important-looking humans for information that was unlikely to work. He knew of only one person that would know about Warwick and all the other stuff he needed. He was going to have to visit Lupira. You stay here and guard this place. I will be back soon, Black Nail told the dozen hobgoblins that hadn't gone with Avorlus. He expected some of them to sneak out and explore the city the second he left, but hopefully they would at least organize some sort of watch. Right now, he was too distracted to care, though. You don't want anyone to go with you, one of the guards asked. I really don't, Black Nail answered grimly. There was no way he wanted any of his minions around when he visited Lupira. Not that he cared what they thought, but they would be putty in her hands, unlike him. Black Nail was known for his iron self-control. After leaving the other hobgoblins behind, Black Nail walked out onto the street and began making his way to Lupira's home. He hoped she still lived in the same place. Having to search for her would be annoying. The sun had fully risen above the horizon now, but Black Nail didn't bother sulking through the shadows. With his hood up he was just another private individual. In the slums, the few people he passed ignored him. This wasn't surprising since half of them looked even more suspicious than he did. One man in dirty brown clothes was dragging a sack that made a coughing noise as Black Nail walked by. The hobgoblin was tempted to seize the sack and see what was inside, but he had to prioritize. The street he was on led him past rows of small homes and onto a larger road lined by stalls and shops. This still wasn't the best part of the city, but it was an improvement. There were a lot more people milling around here, but no one gave Black Nail trouble. He looked down to hide his face, stepped into the crowd, and made his way through them. He passed by colorful peddlers, confident thugs, and tired-looking workers as merchants hawked their wares from nearby stalls. Black Nail made sure he kept an eye out for children so he could avoid them. Almost all the small humans were thieves out to steal his shinies, but they weren't the biggest hazard. The real danger was the carts or horses being led around. Black Nail distrusted horses. They were vile creatures that stank like death and their eyes shone with hatred. He made sure he didn't go anywhere near them so they couldn't kick or bite him. Eventually Black Nail passed through several different sections of the city and found himself standing outside the large building that Lupira shared with lots of other scantily clad women. There was a bald man in a red vest guarding the door. He was taller and much more muscular than most human men, and he probably weighed 3 times as much as a hobgoblin. Black Nail considered walking up and beating him to a pulp, just to prove that he could. However, Lupira had reacted badly the last time he had hurt one of her employees. Should he just go up and ask to see her? She would undoubtedly want to see him, but would they actually tell her that he was here? Black Nail decided to just sneak in through the back. That was what he had done every other time and it had worked out fine, even though he'd had to fight his way through a small army of assassins once. It was unlikely to happen twice though, so Black Nail headed around to the alley behind the building and climbed inside the window that led to Lupira's bedroom. It was empty. The fancy-looking room with its ornate furniture and huge 4-post bed looked much the same, but it smelled very different. Not only was the scent of Lupira's unique perfume gone, but the woman's own scent had been replaced by that of an unfamiliar woman. This isn't good, Black Nail mused to himself as he examined the room. He didn't find any treats or signs of Lupira, just lots of silky clothes. As Black Nail was examining a particularly frilly piece of clothing he had found in a drawer, someone knocked on the suite's door. The hobgoblin sat up. The bedroom door that led to the sitting room was open, so Black Nail got ready to hide. Black Nail, the mistress invites you to join her, a man politely announced from outside the suite. How? Black Nail hissed to himself in confusion. They knew he was here? What? That didn't make any sense. There was no way some lazy city humans had seen him. He was a master sneaker of peerless skill. Slowly, Black Nail got up and made his way over to the suite door. He could hear relaxed breathing from the other side, but that was it. The man there wasn't moving and seemed perfectly willing to wait for him. The hobgoblin hesitated and then opened the door. It swung open to reveal a thin older man with a neatly trimmed grey mustache who nodded respectfully in welcome. He was wearing a tidy outfit with black pants, a white shirt, and a red vest. Hello. Black Nail greeted him. Hello to you as well. This way please. The mistress is waiting, the servant replied as he gestured down the hall. He was wearing white gloves and he didn't seem surprised in the slightest by Black Nail's appearance. Black Nail shrugged and began walking in the indicated direction. It wasn't like he had any better options, and he was used to being confused and irritated whenever Lupira was involved. A familiar fate 6. The prim servant with the mustache and the fancy clothes led Black Nail around a corner and down to the very end of the hallway. He then stepped to the side and gestured towards the door there. The mistress is waiting just inside for you, he announced politely. Black Nail resisted the urge to wipe the pleased look off his face by kicking him in the groin. Instead, the hobgoblin stared at the door for a moment, before sighing and pushing it open. He would have much preferred it if he'd been able to sneak in, instead of being invited like this. All this preparation for his arrival resembled a trap far too much for his comfort. Lupira probably didn't want to kill him, but that didn't mean her intentions would be in his best interest, especially if she got handsy. She had tricked him into doing things for her more than once. Not this time, though. Black Nail had changed. He was going to stay in control of the situation. He was a leader now, and he wasn't going to let a human woman tempt him into doing anything that undermined his pride. The door in front of Black Nail swung open to reveal a lavish sitting room that was much larger than the one in Lupira's old suite. Tasteful bits of ornate furniture ringed the room and art decorated the walls. A pair of cushioned couches sat in one corner and there was a long low table in front of them. The first thing Black Nail noticed was the plates of food on the table. The second thing he noticed was that Lupira was sprawled out on one of the couches. She was laying on her side in a bold but lazy posture, and she smiled confidently as Black Nail walked in. As per usual, she was wearing thin silk clothes that revealed the shape of her. Although this time they were blue and instead of a dress she had on loose trousers. After studying her for a moment, Black Nail shifted his gaze and focused on her eyes. Looking at her body muddled his thinking, but her eyes revealed her intelligence and confidence. Luphira had power. It wasn't the type of power that Black Nail was used to, but it was very real and very dangerous. Black Nail had to concentrate on that, and not on the curviness of her hips. Ah, Black Nail. I'd been hoping that you'd come visit me again. It has been so very boring here without my favorite gentleman caller around. I found myself longing for the excitement of your company, Luphira said as the door behind Black Nail shut with dull final thump. Luphira continued to smile invitingly as she sat up and pushed some of her long blonde hair behind her ear. As she moved, the long neck of sleeveless shirt shifted and more of her ample bosom was exposed. Black Nail did his best to focus on her eyes. How did you know I was here? He asked her. That was still bugging him. Luphira laughed. I deal in information and I have people everywhere. That's not an answer. If you want something from me then you need to pay for it, although this won't cost you much. You just need to stop being so rude and greet me properly, Luphira replied in a playful tone. Black Nail didn't like being told what to do, he was a leader, not a minion but this was just a small thing. It's good to see you again, Luphira. You smell as nice as ever, Black Nail said as he grinned at his host. The scent of her perfume filled the room and was hard not to notice. Thank you, please hang your cloak and jacket on the hook by the door. They aren't needed. It's nice and warm in here, she replied as she gestured towards a brazier that was sitting in the far corner of the room. After forcing himself not to growl, Black Nail did as she had asked. It was warm in here, and again this was a perfectly reasonable and normal request for her to make. Taking off his jacket made him feel exposed for some reason, though. As he turned around to face Luphira again, she got up from the couch and walked over to him. Black Nail couldn't help but notice how her hips swayed as she walked. Hera's didn't move like that. Wait, why was he comparing them? See, that wasn't so hard, Luphira remarked as she picked something up off a cabinet and handed it to him. These are for you. Think of them as a gift from someone looking to please a handsome leader. Receiving a gift thrilled Black Nail. Obviously, Luphira knew how amazing he was, and she had mentioned that he was leader. Black Nail took the items and looked them over. It was a full set of clothes, including socks. They were nice looking if very different from what he usually wore, much softer. The shirt was white and long-sleeved. The pants were black and surprisingly snug. Usually human clothes were very loose on him and fit poorly, although that wasn't surprising since every piece of clothing he owned had been looted from dead people. Luphira smiled invitingly. Try them on. Right now? Black Nail asked uncertainly. He wasn't usually concerned about nudity. Until his master had taught him otherwise, he had spent most of his life running around naked, but he liked the idea of having as many barriers as possible between himself and Luphira right now. Well, you're not loitering around here in those dirty rags. This is a classy establishment. The least you can do is wear something clean. Black Nail grimaced. His clothes weren't dirty. Sure, they had dirt on them, but it was the good kind. They barely stank at all, especially when compared to humans. Most humans don't like people changing in front of them, Black Nail pointed out. He'd had this explained to him several times. Vorsha in particular had told him she didn't want to see his skinny green ass, even though she had usually been very practical for a human. He missed her. It's nothing I haven't seen before, Luphira replied. She twittered with obvious amusement. Can I change in the next room? Black Nail asked. It might be better to play this safe. I can hardly stop you, Luphira laughed. However, why would you bother? Are you afraid of little me? Black Nail was not afraid of anyone. He huffed and immediately began disrobing. However, when he looked up to see Luphira licking her lips he had to suppress a shudder. It was possible he may have just been tricked, so he pulled on his new clothes as quickly as possible. Yes, these look quite good on you, Luphira commented as she walked over and adjusted his clothing a bit. It was definitely worth all the trouble of having them custom-made and coming up with a style to fit your figure and features. You look absolutely chilling, like a uniquely sophisticated beast. Black Nail held very still as she smoothed out some wrinkles on his shirt. His new clothes were so soft they almost tickled his skin. It was distracting. He had never worn anything like them before. Will you tell me how you knew I was here now? He asked. He really wanted to know. It didn't seem possible. Yes, of course, since you're being so well behaved. It's not complicated, Luphira replied as she walked back over to her couch and sat down. When I received word of a figure matching your description being seen around Dagger Point again, I immediately placed that window you entered through under surveillance by someone in the neighboring building. You've used it every time you've come to visit me. I'm too sneaky. No one could have seen me, Black Nail countered gruffly. Although, he supposed they might have noticed another hobgoblin that wasn't nearly as handsome as him and somehow mistaken them. There were a few other hints that you were back in the city as well, such as the arrival of a group of Herod's old minions and some rather large explosions. Black Nail huffed. So it was Geralt's fault. The explosions didn't have anything to do with me. I just watched them. Yet we tend not to see very many destructive displays of magic such as those in this city, except for some reason when you're around. You have a way of livening up the place, Luphira said as she leaned sideways against the arm of the sofa she was sitting on. I'm just not lazy, unlike some people, Black Nail told her. I find the excitement you bring to be one of your more charming traits. But surely you have some other questions. Alas, you never just visit for the pleasure of my company. Oh, right. He was here for a purpose. Black Nail scratched his nose and considered what to say. Maybe he should try to turn the tables a bit and be charming. He was so handsome that it had to work, especially with his nice new clothes. I did come just to see you. You're the best smelling human in the entire city, and you're also so smart. You know practically everything, he told her as he put on his most charming smile. He wasn't sure how effective it would be since he had never tried it before. Luphira pouted. So you don't want anything from me? Everyone wants stuff from everyone else. Humans and hobgoblins are the same that way, although hobgoblins are more honest and direct about it, Black Nail replied. They usually just took what they wanted without asking. Like you are right now. Luphira asked with an amused smile. Exactly. I'm completely honest. Luphira sat up and patted the surface of the sofa next to her. Well, if you're here to relax and enjoy some conversation with the best-smelling woman in Daggerpoint, why don't you come sit down? Black Nail hesitated. He may have made a tactical error. Was it too late to flee for his life? He didn't want to get too close, but on the other hand that was where the food was and he was getting sort of hungry. There was even a plate of cheese slices. It didn't seem like he had much of a choice, so Black Nail sighed quietly to himself and reluctantly walked over to sit stiffly down next to Luphira. Then he helped himself to a slice of cheese. It was very good, but Black Nail wondered how much it was going to cost him. Now, what did you want to talk about? I'm shivering in anticipation of your conversational topic of choice, Luphira whispered as she leaned up against Black Nail and tilted her head so that it rested against his shoulder. So how are things here? Black Nail asked her. He was being subtle and indirect. Luphira suddenly sat up straight so that she wasn't leaning against him anymore. Ha, they've been better. Business has been good, especially the physical part. There is more money moving through the city now, but my real area of interest has been drying up. There is a lot less intrigue in a city controlled by one man. Everyone is holding their breath and waiting to see what happens next. Warwick rules Daggerpoint, Black Nail remarked in a deliberate attempt to steer the conversation. Being subtle was easier than he'd thought it would be. Ruling is probably too strong of a word, but yes, Luphira replied with sly smile. All the remaining bandit chiefs and gang lords have bent the knee. He left a lieutenant and the man is nominally in charge of the city, although the governor still runs the inner district as before. What about you? I'm neither a bandit nor a gang lord. I wasn't asked to swear to anyone, and if something mysterious and assuredly fatal happened to Warwick or his men I would quietly cheer and uncork a bottle of my best wine. The city is growing boring and stale. There are no opportunities for me to prosper in such a place. This lieutenant, where does he live and what is his security like? Black Nail asked in as neutral a tone as he could manage. Luphira leaned back, raised a leg, and placed a bare foot on Black Nail's thigh. Oh, why would you want to know that? You made me curious. Black Nail replied uncertainly as he stared at her manicured toes. He didn't want to give himself away, but it was hard to focus. Well, I'll do my best to satisfy your curiosity then. The name of Warwick's top man in the city is Cedric. He's holed up in a mansion on the edge of the inner district, and he has quite a few guards, although he relies far more on borrowing Warwick's strength than using his own. He doesn't have nearly the forces necessary to keep everyone else in line, Luphira explained before going into more detail. She withdrew her foot and continued talking for several minutes. Black Nail nodded along. Occasionally he grabbed a piece of fruit or cheese from the table as he listened. Is your desire for knowledge sated now? Luphira asked once she was done speaking. No, I don't know much about Warwick, other than the obvious. I bet you do, though. Ah, there is an interesting man, even if he isn't my type. I've met him only once briefly, but he's too important for me not to have learned everything I can about him. Before I reveal anything more though, how about you do some sharing of your own? It's only polite for you to entertain your host. Me? What do you want to know about? Black Nail asked in surprise. Yes, you. I find you absolutely fascinating. You've never told me anything about yourself. I'm sure it's a riveting story. A frown appeared on Black Nail's lips as he thought back. He'd spent most his life a tiny goblin in a sewer. He didn't feel like sharing this story, so he twisted the truth a little instead. I wandered the wild south when I was younger, he explained to start off his story. Luphira listened to him make stuff up until he finished with his arrival in Daggerpoint the first time. What have you been up to since our last meeting? You were part of Herad's band, but Warwick wiped them out. Obviously, you survived. Yes, I survived, although my master Cedar didn't. Warwick killed him, Black Nail hissed. He couldn't help himself from showing some anger as the emotion flooded over him. Alas, so Cedar really is dead. He was quite the man if half the stories about him were to be believed. He was the best man in the entire world, and I will avenge him, Black Nail replied as his eyes narrowed in fury. A flash of interest appeared within Luphira's eyes but then it quickly disappeared. She reached out and put a comforting hand on the hobgoblin's shoulder. But how did you survive? Black Nail mentally went through some sword drills to calm himself down. Cedar had been the one to teach them to him. I'm very hard to kill. I fought Warwick but had to go save some of my human minions. I guided them through the forest. None of Warwick's men could hope to catch me in the green. Luphira sighed dramatically. The endless green, so close and yet so unreachable. You have such interesting tales of it. Here in Daggerpoint, it lurks just out of sight and we try not to think about it, yet it has all of us city dwellers completely surrounded. We could visit it at any time, but only the blandest of its edges. We would never survive the journey to its heart, where its true splendors await. Mostly it's full of trees and things that want to eat you, Black Nail pointed out. Lupira rolled her eyes. Warwick's attack on Harad was months ago. Where did you go after that? I found a safe place out in the woods, and made some human friends. They liked me because I helped them kill some other humans. Such is the way of the world, Lupira laughed. But I'd heard that you have some other friends as well. Where did you find them? She was probably talking about the hobgoblins. Black Nail shrugged without concern. If she knew about them then she knew about them. I just sort of found them out in the forest. I'm a natural leader so they decided to follow me around. Lupira leaned over and stroked Black Nail's nose with a playful finger. And now you're here seeking vengeance with new friends and allies. You seem very confident. Since you're so smart and such a great leader, surely you have some other exciting resources that you haven't told anyone about. Black Nail shivered in delight. I have a cave full of gold and some mages. That is so interesting. I knew you wouldn't disappoint me. Black Nail groaned. Why had he admitted that? The gold was supposed to be a secret. Lupira was starting to get to him, and her sweet perfume was starting to clog up his brain. He needed to steer the conversation back to where he wanted it to go. Can you tell me about Warwick now? Of course. I'd be glad to help my favorite hobgoblin, Lupira answered as she snuggled in close to him. Warwick was the second son of a minor noble that held lands on the western border of Hulgaron. While he was away fighting for his country his family lands were decimated by the war with Eloria. When news reached him he deserted and managed to convince his entire squad to come along. He then came north and set himself up as a bandit captain, but even then he wasn't satisfied. His drive and ambition pushed him to seek out more power and prestige for himself. What does he want? He is already the most powerful chieftain, Black Nail asked her. He wanted to understand his enemy. Well, I can't read his mind, but I imagine he wants to be a king. He is a man of noble stock after all. Normally such a thing wouldn't be possible, but these aren't normal times. What's left of the border lords are holed up in their castles and little more than bandits themselves, and the neighboring countries have bled themselves dry in their wars. How is a king different from a chief, and what wars are we talking about? Black Nail asked. He barely understood some of the terms and references she was using, and he felt like the details were important here. Well, that will take a long time to explain. If you want to know all that then you'll have to stay the night, Lupira purred as she grabbed his arm and pulled him closer. Black Nail felt his elbow rub up against Lupira's chest. He suddenly felt an uncomfortable feeling down below his belly. It was an itch he desperately wanted scratched and Lupira's scent was intoxicating. Desperately, he tried to remember that she was just a fat pink human, but it didn't work. The memory of the soft feel of her skin filled his mind instead. The color suddenly didn't seem all that important, even if green was far superior in every way. I guess I should stay then. It's my duty as a leader to learn as much as possible, he told her as he stared at her breasts through her semi-translucent shirt. He was a great leader. A familiar fate 7. The terrified scream echoed out from the dark hallway behind Black Nail and into the building beyond. The now annoyed hobgoblin had been stealthily stalking towards the door that led to his target, but he stopped for a moment and hissed in frustration. One of his minions had messed up. Now the enemy had been warned and the assault had to be sped up. Thankfully this was dagger point and it was still dark out. No one from outside would be coming to investigate. Getting involved in other people's problems was a bad survival strategy here. We move now. Kill everyone and leave no witnesses, Black Nail ordered the half-dozen hobgoblins behind him before drawing his sword and dashing forward. The sound of running feet on wooden floorboards broke the quiet as the inhuman killers abandoned stealth and suddenly began sprinting toward the door at the end of the hallway. Black Nail reached in first, and he grunted in effort as he kicked it. There was an ear-splitting crunch and thud as it burst open, and he dove inside. The room on the other side was dark, but there was enough moonlight coming in from one small window that the hobgoblins could make out the outlines of the chamber's contents. Rows of beds lined both walls, and most of them were occupied. What in all the hells? Someone yelled as they scrambled out of bed and tried to make sense of what was going on. The other occupants of the room were reacting in a similar manner, but it was dark and they had all been asleep until a moment ago, so they were moving slowly and without organization. Without pause, Black Nail lunged forward and cut the closest man down as he fumbled around blindly. Behind him, his hobgoblin minions flooded into the room. Blades sliced through the shadows and found soft flesh. More screams and curses filled the air as the confused and disoriented humans began to grow terrified. The scent of blood filled the room, and giggles of delight could be heard beneath the screams as the hobgoblins delighted in their grisly work. They were predators in their element. Oh, gods! What's going on? Someone pleaded. Then, there was a flash as a man at the back of the room managed to light a lamp. The unexpected illumination flooded into the room, reflected off raised blades, and revealed the attackers. Shit, the lamp bearer cursed softly as everyone froze for a brief moment and looked around for the first time. He had just rolled out of bed so he was completely nude, which made it obvious he was trembling in fear of the sight before him. Keep fighting. They are ours, Black Nail yelled as he stabbed a man that tried to run past him. He didn't want his minions to falter just because the odds had changed a little. A big bald man wearing nothing but a loose shirt produced a sword from somewhere. Black Nail stepped forward to engage him before he could strike out at another hobgoblin. The man hesitated and then swung wildly at Black Nail's head. Black Nail ducked under the blow and gutted his opponent with a precise horizontal slash. A disbelieving grunt of pain escaped the man's lips as he fell and his guts slipped out of his abdomen. They made quite a mess on the floor. As Black Nail moved on to cut down his next victim, his minions struggled with the other humans. Some of them had dropped or lost their swords and were biting and clawing at their opponents. One unlucky hobgoblin was punched in the face by a large pot-bellied man and collapsed into a heap. However, Black Nail advanced up the center of the room and his swift blade cut through any resistance that formed. Filled with terror, the humans fought desperately, but they were swiftly overwhelmed. Confronted with inhuman opponents that most of them only knew from stories, they didn't plead for mercy as they fell, and Black Nail didn't give them any. Soon, the floor was drenched in blood and all its former occupants were dead. Now to the next room, Black Nail growled as he turned back towards the door. He didn't have time to waste. The hobgoblin chieftain ran back out into the hallway and towards his next objective. The attack on Cedric's headquarters was going well. Thanks to Lupira's information, Black Nail knew exactly where everything was. After taking out the sentries in a coordinated attack, he had divided his followers into teams and sent them to take 3 different objectives. Even now, his minions were rushing through the building and killing all the humans they found. They were outnumbered. Cedric had over 50 men in this building alone, but the hobgoblins had the advantage of surprise and momentum. Quite a few enemies had died in bed or before they could even figure out what was going on in the darkness around them. Black Nail grinned as he felt a throb of sadistic glee. Hobgoblin Nightsight could be very useful if used correctly by a great leader, and he was better than a great leader. Another door appeared out of the darkness in front of Black Nail. He kicked it, but it was unlocked, so he lost his balance as the door slammed into the wall behind it. Cursing, he stumbled forward but then caught himself and looked around the room. This one was already lit by a lamp. The people within had used the warning they had been given to start to organize, but there were only 3 of them. Black Nail was unsurprised. This was Cedric's room, and leaders usually didn't share their chambers. What in damnation are you supposed to be? The man in the center of the room swore as he looked Black Nail over. He matched the description of Cedric, a tall man with short black hair. The other 2 residents of the room, a man and a woman who looked like servants, were helping him strap a boiled leather breastplate over a simple shirt and trousers that he must have just thrown on. Your death, Black Nail replied with a mirthless laugh and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Cedric grunted as he reached over and picked up a sword of the bed beside him. His servants both finished attaching his breastplate. The woman stepped back away with a fearful look on her face, while the male drew a long dagger. No, you're that hobgoblin. The one they call the Faceless Killer. I'd heard you were dangerous, but you can't be doing this alone, Cedric remarked as he raised his weapon and took up a defensive stance. It was at that moment that several of Black Nail's minions caught up and slipped into the room behind their boss. Their arrival surprised Cedric and he grimaced. That answers my question, I suppose. Yes, it does, Black Nail laughed as he stepped forward and attacked. His opponent easily dodged the blow by leaning back, but Black Nail turned the slash into a flurry of attacks. Cedric blocked one and then dodged the others, before slashing at Black Nail's chest with a 2-handed strike. His sword was a longer and heavier weapon, so Black Nail dodged instead of blocking. Meanwhile, the servant with the knife tried to circle around and get at Black Nail's exposed side, but 2 hobgoblins intercepted him and forced him back. Another hobgoblin circled around to approach the female servant. Before he got too close though, she pulled out a long knife of her own, and the hobgoblin hesitated. There was a metallic ringing as Cedric blocked a downward slash from Black Nail. The hobgoblin jumped back and looked for an opening. He feinted a stab and turned it into an upward riposte when Cedric tried to parry it. Black Nail's weapon caught on his opponent's breastplate and then slid up and away without doing any damage. Cedric took a step back and glared at Black Nail. What are you here for, creature? To deliver a message to your master, all his friends, and all of his enemies, Black Nail shot back. He was getting a little tired of this fight. It might be time to order his minions to help. He didn't have any elixir left to burn and he didn't feel like taking any risks. Fighting the wolf is a fool's errand. Black Nail laughed with dark amusement. Says the man whose corpse will soon be a warning to others. Not likely, Cedric growled as he lunged forward and launched a flurry of attacks. Both the human servants had managed to keep their hobgoblin attackers away so far, but as the man slashed at the hand of one hobgoblin, another jumped forward and stabbed him in the gut. He gasped and collapsed with the sword stuck in his belly. The woman gasped but didn't drop her guard. This development left Cedric's side exposed to Black Nail's minions. He let up his attack and shifted into a defensive stance. You can't fight all of Warwick's men. He has allies and friends everywhere. The north belongs to him, the bandit lieutenant told Black Nail. He has no friends in the green. He has no allies nearby to save you. The north belongs to whoever holds it, Black Nail replied as he stepped forward. His minions smiled and pressed in to pressure Cedric's flank. On the other side, the woman was now desperately flailing with her knife. She had kept the hobgoblin assaulting her at bay so far, but she couldn't keep it up. Her assailant was playing it safe and constantly feinting with his longer blade to wear her out. Suddenly, she stumbled and the hobgoblin facing her reacted. His blade sliced down and cut into her arm. She yelped and fell backwards, dropping her weapon as she instinctively clutched her wound. Her opponent followed up by kicking her in the head, and there was a cracking noise as she fell over sideways. Unconscious, she didn't stir as she began to bleed out onto the floor from the gash on her arm. Black Nail grinned and focused on Cedric. A female opponent was no different from a man to him, and he wasn't even slightly interested in mercy when it came to anyone who worked for Warwick, even indirectly. Mercy was human thing anyway. Cedric looked grim now, and he had good reason. He was surrounded by hobgoblins on 3 sides. Why are you doing this? He asked Black Nail. Warwick will unite this land and build something better. He is the greatest man I've met, and I'm sure he could use your skills or at least pay you off. I don't care at all. The wolf attacked my tribe and killed my master. He took what was mine, my most precious things. I can never get them back, so I will take from him in kind, Black Nail hissed as he motioned for his minions to attack. It was time to finish this. As he lunged forward from the front, Black Nail's followers closed in on Cedric from the other directions. You will fail, you pathetic creature, the man growled as he glared at Black Nail. You've already failed, Black Nail hissed back as he slashed at Cedric's front leg. The man had no option but to block the attack, and then try to twist away from the other hobgoblin's blades as they took the opportunity to attack all at once. He failed. With pleased hisses, Black Nail's minions stabbed and slashed their opponent. Some of the blows bounced off the breastplate, but others sank deep into flesh and cut into organs. Shuddering, Cedric coughed up a mouthful of blood and then tottered over backwards. A moment later, Black Nail walked over and kicked him in the ribs. He didn't move or appear to be breathing, so the hobgoblin turned away. I win, Black Nail announced to no one in particular as he walked over to the bed and used a sheet to wipe the blood off his blade. Now that all the enemies were down, some of his minions copied him. He'd made sure they knew the importance of keeping their blades clean. Take his breastplate off and carry it for me. It's mine now, Black Nail told one of his minions as he stepped back out into the hallway. It seemed like the mission had gone perfectly. Their main target, Cedric, was dead, and it didn't sound like there was anyone still putting up any resistance. Black Nail walked over to a window and stared out of it. The moonlit rooftops of Dagger Point lay before him, and they looked a lot less shabby in the dark. As he stared at the scene, the hobgoblin felt his heartbeat slow and his fury slip away. He took a moment to reflect. This was a blow against Warwick. The death of his lieutenant would weaken his hold on the city and make him look weak. A weak chieftain would face many more challengers and have fewer options than one that seemed invincible. Black Nail could also use the fallout to manipulate others into doing what he wanted. Yes, everything was going perfectly, but he didn't feel any better. He was still hollow inside. Warwick was still alive. Cedar was still dead. Black Nail growled and stomped off to organize his minions. Thinking about this was pointless, and the mission wasn't quite over yet. He had meant what he'd told Cedric about leaving a message. The ruin and horror he was about to make this building into would be Black Nail's message to Warwick. All his minions already had their orders, and were undoubtedly already fulfilling them, but Black Nail wanted to make sure they stayed on task. Bodies were moved, furniture was torn apart, and everything that was both shiny and light enough to carry was gathered up by hobgoblins as Black Nail stalked through the building and oversaw the work. His minions went about their tasks with obvious glee and they tried to outdo each other. In one room 5 mangled bodies had been hung from the roof with rope, while in another the bodies had all been hacked into pieces and strewn all over the room. When it was about time to leave, Black Nail went back to Cedric's room and cut off the man's head. He carried it by its hair over to the front door, and while all his minions watched, he impaled it on a wooden spike that one of his minions had driven into the ground. No one that approached the building in the morning could fail to notice the bloody detached head, and no one that learned of what had happened inside the building could fail to realize that this hadn't been a normal fight. Word would spread and carry fear and uncertainty with it all the way to Warwick. Victory is ours. This is just a taste of things to come, Black Nail told his gathered minions. I will lead you to all the best and tastiest prizes you can imagine. We will hunt our enemies and spread our tribe's territory far and wide. The crowd of hobgoblins cheered, and Black Nail grinned in satisfaction. He knew how to motivate hobgoblins and keep them loyal. He just had to keep on winning, and this had been a great victory. Not a single hobgoblin had died. A few had gotten injured, but that was it. The humans had been completely caught off guard and unable to defend themselves as Black Nail's minions had cut them down in the dark. Since they had accomplished their mission and they had already loitered here too long after making so much noise, Black Nail led his minions through the streets as it began to grow lighter out. The sun was just beginning to rise. Instead of going to the safe house, they headed toward the city wall. Once there, they climbed over it and slipped out the city. It was possible that they might have picked up some observers and Black Nail didn't want to lead them back to the safe house. He also wanted to check in on the forest camp. He'd left Hera in charge of watching Vorlis there. The birds were signing their morning songs as the victorious hobgoblins slipped into the forest. The streets had been empty and they hadn't run into any problems on the way out of the city. Black Nail located a familiar animal trail and they followed it through the trees and over to the hill where they had set up the camp. It was only about half an hour from the walls. The only way up the hill from the direction of Dagger Point was easily watched. It involved using a fallen tree to cross a stream that lay at the bottom of a deep chasm and taking a narrow path up a steep rock face. Thus, they were spotted well before they reached it. Black Nail had left sentries out to watch in case the guild tried to track down Vorlis. The sentries acknowledged their companion's presence but stayed at their posts as they passed them by. Soon enough, Black Nail reached the top of the hill and saw the camp before him. It was a simple collection of tents that had been set up among some large rocks, and various bags and piles of loot lay around the place. As he had expected, Black Nail noticed Hera and Vorlis sitting by the fire pit, but they weren't alone. Something red and annoying was sitting beside Hera. It was Kita. What? He had left her behind in Dagger Point. How could she have possibly found this place? Ah, there you are, Black Nail. I was beginning to think you were never going to show up, the redhead young woman remarked cheerfully as she stood up to greet him. How did you get here? Black Nail spat back in frustration. Oh, Hera came and got me. She wanted to talk to me about some stuff. What? Black Nail wasn't completely sure why, but he didn't like this development. It smelled like a conspiracy against him. I saw that you've captured another mage. I don't know why you want them all, but I'm sure you have a plan. I do, and it's a great plan. This mage knows how to make my elixir. He's why I came to the city. I need elixir to kill my enemies easier. Well, at least this one isn't tied up and naked, unlike the last. Is it because he's a man? Excuse me? Avorlus asked in alarm as he threw a nervous look at his captor. Black Nail hissed and stomped the ground in exasperation as he glared at Kita. That wasn't me. Imp did that, and it made sense. Who knows what dangerous magic thingies that woman was keeping in her clothes? Why did Kita keep bringing this up? During the battle at Shelter, Black Nail had knocked out the Raider's mage. While he had been resting after his glorious victory, Imp and some other hobgoblins had captured her, and then taken some simple and completely justified safety measures that Kita wouldn't stop bringing up. Ah, sure. That sounds believable, the redhead replied as she smirked. Black Nail hissed again. Why did humans have to make something as simple and pure as stripping and tying up your prisoners so complicated? They injected sex into even completely innocent activates. It was disgusting. There was a time and a place. A familiar fate ate. Grunting in annoyance, Black Nail wandered away from the center of the hobgoblins' forest camp and sat down on a stone that was right beside his tent. He needed to take a quick break. Being around Kita was tiring, and he'd just completed a difficult mission that had involved a lot of hard fighting and great leadership. He also hadn't gotten a lot of sleep last night for reasons, and it was still early in the morning. Black Nail closed his eyes, but he found it difficult to clear his mind. Up in the trees, the birds were singing their morning tunes and incessantly chirping away. He was also not left alone. Kita murmured something to Hera and then wandered over to Black Nail's side. He looked up at her and scowled. What do you want? To talk to you about some things, Kita replied with a shrug. Too bad. Go away. She didn't listen. I was just having a chat with Hera. My eyes and ears work fine. I knew that, Black Nail observed derisively. Wow, you're grumpy right now. I'm trying to rest my eyes and think, but you're bugging me, like a bug. Stop buzzing around and go away, Black Nail replied with a wave of his hand as if to shoo her away. Well, you're not busy right now, and this is important. Fine, what is it? Black Nail sighed. It was probably best to deal with Kita quickly so that she would leave him alone. Kita smiled gleefully. Right, so I was talking to Hera and she mentioned that you'd been avoiding her, even though anyone can see that she wants to jump your bones. That's none of your business. Why do you care? Black Nail hissed. Hera is my friend. Black Nail doubted that, but he humored the redhead. She's a hobgoblin. And you don't find them attractive? What, do you like human women or men or something? Hey. Black Nail sputtered in surprise. What was she getting at? Did she know about Hera? That's nonsense. Stop being so stupid, you ugly human, he quickly shot back. Of course hobgoblins are much better looking than humans. You're all fat, and pink. Then what's the problem? Kita asked. Black Nail rolled his eyes and sneered at her. Hobgoblins can't be trusted. They are devious and violent. Letting them near you is stupid. I can't let her get too close or she might kill me and take my place as leader. Kita gave Black Nail a perplexed look as she titled her head to the side. You're a hobgoblin too. That's why I know they can't be trusted. Black Nail explained. No one knew hobgoblins better than he did. So the others and I shouldn't trust you. That's different. Why? Black Nail hesitated before replying. Because I'm loyal and amazing, and I'm already the leader anyway. Kita shook her head. Right, I think you're being stupid and paranoid. Hera is attractive for a hobgoblin, right? Yes, Black Nail answered uncertainly. That was one of the reasons she was dangerous. Then you should definitely hook up with her. Just have fun. What? Several rather odd and confusing images popped into Black Nail's head. He gave Kita a startled look. You should have sex with her, she explained dryly. I don't want your advice about this. Go away, stupid girl. Seriously, this might be the most annoying conversation Black Nail had ever had with Kita, and that was saying something. Ugh, you're being stupid. Just relax and have fun. We're all going to die eventually, Kita told him as she turned and began walking back to Hera. But I have things to do before then, Black Nail growled at her back. Kita didn't know anything. She was human, and not a very smart one. Sure, Black Nail would have enjoyed playing around with Hera. She had nice pointy ears, and a properly thin body, unlike Hera, but she was dangerous. Black Nail could feel it in his bones. More than once, he'd caught her looking at him like he was a big juicy steak. That was unnerving. Yet, Hera couldn't be trusted either and he'd messed around with her. Black Nail could take care of himself, and it was possible that Hera wasn't actually trying to kill him. Perhaps he was just so handsome that she couldn't help but want to be with him and keep him around? He did have the nicest looking nose in the north. Before Black Nail could think about the situation anymore, a hobgoblin appeared at the edge of camp and ran over to him. Boss, I found something while I was in the city, the newcomer announced excitedly. Oh? What is it? Black Nail asked as he looked up. He wasn't going to ask why the hobgoblin had been wandering the city alone, because he already knew the answer. A lot of the hobgoblins were sneaking away to explore. He was also grateful for the interruption. A familiar scent, a human. I found someone in the city that was back at our main camp. Black Nail could think of only one person that could be. He stood up and smiled. Oh, really? Take me to them. Soon, Black Nail and some his minions were sneaking back into Dagger Point. Kida and Hera invited themselves along this time, but Black Nail ignored them. It was amazing how ineffectual the city wall was at keeping hobgoblins out. They could easily scale it, dig under it, or slip through the gaps in the wood. It didn't seem like anyone ever patrolled or repaired the barrier. I'm stuck. Kida hissed from where she was balancing atop the wall. She was having a more difficult time slipping into the city and had required a lot of help. Just jump down, Black Nail told her impatiently. It's like a 3-story drop from here. Are you going to catch me? No, you're a big fat human. You'd crush me. Black Nail told her. I'm not fat. You hobgoblins are just skinny, Kida huffed as she began to slowly climb down. Black Nail had provided her with a rope, but it was still taking her forever. When she reached the bottom, the party quickly made their way along several back streets and towards a rundown residential district. They avoided as many people as possible and people avoided them right back. The dirty-looking workers and tired women that walked by gave them plenty of space. The trail led here, the hobgoblin they were all following said as he came to a stop across the street from an inn. They were standing beside an empty stall that somewhat concealed them from casual observation. The inn was a rather shabby structure that looked like it had seen better days. The faded sign over the door bore the image of a cup, or maybe it was a tower. It was hard to tell. Black Nail took a few moments to think about the best way to approach this situation. Having their entire group walk into the inn would probably be a bad idea. There was no way a whole group of hooded individuals wouldn't draw attention once they were inside. He would probably be fine if he went in with just Kida, but then what would he do once he found his target? As Black Nail was mulling his options, the door swung open and a man stepped out. After exiting the building, he briefly scanned the surroundings, but his gaze swept right over Black Nail's group without concern, and he began walking away from them and down the street. That's him. Follow me, Black Nail hissed as he set off after the man. The hobgoblins and Kida hung back while their target remained in plain sight of the public. They watched and waited for several minutes as he wandered the city streets, until finally he stepped off of a main road and into an alley. Instantly, Black Nail put on a burst of speed and sprinted after him, with his minions in pursuit. In the alley ahead, the man began muttering to himself and kicked a bit of trash. Damn, innkeeper. He should be paying me to stay in such dirty rooms. If only those raider bastards hadn't taken almost all my gold. Suddenly, he froze as if he'd heard something. With a startled look on his face, he turned to look back over his shoulder. He swiftly spotted the cloaked hobgoblins and jumped in surprise. Is this about the money? He squealed. Were you sent by Jasper to collect? I don't have it on me, but I swear I can get it. My luck at cards is usually very good. That was just a one-time fluke. Instead of answering, Black Nail motioned his minions forward. They jumped on the startled man and began tying him up with rope they'd prepared beforehand. Don't kill me. Oh, gods. I've come too far to die now. Once the man was completely secure and gagged, Black Nail removed his hood and leaned over. Hey there, Elias. It's great to see you again. You don't have to worry anymore. It seems like you got lost and couldn't find your way back to shelter, but your great leader is here to help now. Elias' eyes widened and he opened his mouth wide as if to scream, probably in joy, but then a hobgoblin shoved a sock in his mouth. The only sound he could make was a muffled moan, as he chewed the dirty wool and struggled against the two hobgoblins holding him. Black Nail smiled and continued talking. Good thing we found you before this Jasper fellow. It sounds like you were in trouble. Don't worry, though. He won't find you at shelter. As Elias tired to scream something incomprehensible, Black Nail stood up and ordered 3 of his minions to take the man back to their forest camp and keep him there. As they left, Black Nail wondered where the sock had come from. Why do you even want that loser? Kida asked as she watched Elias be carried off. He's a friend. We can't just leave him all alone in this dangerous city, Black Nail explained as he nodded sagely. It was good to help your friends. Whatever, now that you've had your fun, can we move on to something important? Sure, let's go meet up with Gerald and Beardy. When I'm not around for too long they get into trouble. The inn that Black Nail had last seen his human companions at was in a much better neighborhood on the other side of town from where they were, so it took a while to walk there. With the others gone, only 3 hobgoblins were left with them, so they didn't draw too much attention as they walked along the main roads. When they reached their destination, Black Nail left the other hobgoblins outside and entered through the front door with Kida. The place was mostly empty, although there were still a few people around. Most of them seemed to be drinking and keeping to themselves, which suited Black Nail just fine. I'll go up to their rooms. The innkeeper and his employees know me. You should stay down here, Kida suggested. Fine, be quick. Black Nail told her as he looked around for a good place to sit down. He chose a table over in an isolated corner. There was no one else near it. As he sat down to wait, Kida walked up the stairs to the 2nd story and out of sight. Black Nail sighed impatiently, but his boredom was quickly interrupted. A big man who had been drinking at a table across the room got up and wandered his way. He was more fat than muscle, but his fists were almost the size of Black Nail's head. It was amazing how big some humans got. Do you think you're so tough just because you're wearing a fancy hood? It's rude indoors, you know, the huge man said as he glowered at the cloaked hobgoblin. His breath reeked of alcohol. What, are you hiding your ugly mug? I think you must be a hideous bastard under that. Black Nail sighed again and shook his head. No, I think I'm tough because I've killed 100 men like you. A knife appeared in the hobgoblin's hand as he stood up. His motions were smooth and so frighteningly quick the man barely had time to react. Black Nail really wanted to work out some frustration by killing this dumb drunk, but that would draw too much attention. Instead, his blade lashed out at the man's waist. Too quickly to follow, it sliced through cloth and leather while barely grazing the skin beneath. "Hey," the drunk remarked as his pants suddenly fell down. "Leave or die," Black Nail replied as he sat back down without concern. The drunk stared at him for a moment and then looked down. It took him a moment to process what had happened, but when he figured it out he took a quick step back, almost tripped over his pants, and then hurriedly stumbled back to his table as he pulled his trousers back up. There were a few soft laughs from around the room. Black Nail grunted in amusement as he leaned back in his chair. The incident had gotten the attention of a few people, but they didn't do anything more than look his way and whisper among themselves. However, some of those whispers reached his ears and drew his attention. There were two men seated at a table across the room, and they were talking to each other while deliberately not looking in Black Nail's direction. Both of them looked like any other thug off the street. "Is that the hobgoblin?" one of them asked the other. His companions whispered back, but Black Nail's ears caught the reply. "Probably. It's incredible that it can just walk around like this. Even knowing what to look for I can't tell if it's human or not from here. If that's it then we should go get the others. I'm not going to be getting close enough to peek under that hood, so there is no point in staying around." The second thug nodded in agreement, and then they both carefully got up and headed for the door. Black Nail studied them out of the corner of his eye as he pretended to watch the stairs. They knew, but how? Who were they and where had they learned about him? There was only way to find out. Black Nail rose to his feet and followed after the humans. Once he was outside, he spotted a pair of his hobgoblin minions across the street where he had left them. They also noticed him right away, and he flashed them a quick series of hand signals. Upon receiving his orders, the hobgoblin studied the humans that had just left the inn and nodded back to Black Nail. They then slipped away into an alley and out of sight. Black Nail waited a few moments, and then he began to trail his targets. He kept his head down and made sure there was always a group of people between him and the two men he was following, as he walked through the crowds that had come out to shop or work. People were walking and talking everywhere, and Black Nail did his best not to stand out as he kept an eye on his quarry. Then a few moments later, the two men stepped away from the crowd. They walked over to the shadows near a closed shop and began talking amongst themselves, while occasionally scanning the crowd. Black Nail casually sauntered behind a colorful stall and out of sight. It seemed his targets were worried about being followed, but they were also apparently terrible at searching for pursuers. As Black Nail watched, 3 hobgoblins stepped out of the alley behind the men and dragged them into the shadows. Black Nail grinned as he sprinted across the street after them. He slipped into the alley and was confronted by the sight of his minions holding the 2 men at knife point. The humans were holding very still and had their hands up above their heads. Both had hobgoblins behind them with blades pressed against their throats. "Who are you and why were you looking for me?" Black Nail asked them as he stalked over to study them. "We're just pickpockets," one of the men stammered. "That's a lie. Cut off one of his fingers. He has lots of them and if he is stubborn we can remove his toes as well," Black Nail ordered the third hobgoblin that wasn't holding anyone. "Wait, no. I'll tell you everything," the thug quickly offered. Black Nail motioned for the man to continue talking and for his minion to put his knife away. I wanted a human finger," the hobgoblin whined. The first thug wasted no time in spilling his secrets. It was actually impressive how fast he could talk. "We were sent here to look for the crew that attacked Cedric. Our boss thought that if we handled you then Warwick would reward us, or at least know we weren't involved. He wanted to make sure you weren't too much for his gang to swallow first though, so he sent us in to look around before committing the rest of the crew." "And how did you know who attacked Cedric or where I was?" Black Nail asked as he leaned forward to stare into the man's eyes. He was shivering. They were only a few inches apart now, and Black Nail's inhuman appearance obviously terrified him. "Our boss paid an informant. They told him about you and they said that you were tied to a group of thieves that used to serve the Black Snake, before she got herself wasted. They also told us where to find them, at the inn." Black Nail growled and bared his teeth. "Do you have any proof of what you say?" This development was very unwelcome. He had been planning on staying in the city for a while and gathering up a lot more supplies and information. If everyone knew who he was and where to find him that would be impossible. I have this note from the dealer. It has your pal's descriptions on it," the first thug answered as he hurriedly pulled a folded piece of paper out of his pocket. The second man glared at him but kept quiet. Black Nail took the note and unfolded it while everyone watched him. He took his time to study it carefully, but since he couldn't read all the scribbles meant nothing to him. However, he recognized a very faint scent that clung to the paper. It smelled of exotic flowers. The scent tingled his nose and excited him. "Kill the one that didn't talk. Let the other go," Black Nail told his minions. The hobgoblins immediately obeyed. The second thug only had time to blink once before his throat was cut. The other stared at his dying companion in horror as the hobgoblin behind him backed off. Why? He asked in confusion. "So that people know what happens when they go against me and what happens when they cooperate," Black Nail answered dismissively as he turned to leave. The thug stared after him for a second, and then sprinted away down the alley. Black Nail growled to himself as stomped off out into the street. He had some unwanted yet important things to deal with now. His human friends needed warned, and he needed to deal with a tattletale. This was going to be complicated. A familiar fate 9. When Black Nail got back to the inn everyone was waiting for him. Geralt, Kida, and Beardy were standing beside the table he'd been sitting at, and they looked upset. There was a scowl on Geralt's face and Beardy was grimacing. Black Nail walked over and nodded in greeting. Where did you go? Kida asked. She only sounded slightly annoyed. I needed to follow some people and then kill one of them, Black Nail explained. Geralt winced. Who? Are you kidding? Beardy asked as he threw his hands up in exasperation. You're supposed to be staying out of trouble. Black Nail shrugged. He was a spy for someone who wanted to kill all of you. What? Why would anyone want to kill us? Beardy asked. He sounded like he didn't believe Black Nail. That's what I wanted to find out. When I asked, they said a whole bunch of Warwick's men got themselves murdered and chopped up into little bits. They were looking for the people who did it, and someone saw you and remembered that you were Warwick's enemy. We're not his enemies. Herat is dead and we don't work for her anymore. We're just minding our own business now. We certainly didn't kill any of the wolf's men. That doesn't matter. They thought you were involved and were going to gather some friends so they could capture you for questioning, Black Nail told him. It sounds like you had your reasons for wandering off, but I have to ask, did you kill Warwick's followers? Geralt had asked the hobgoblin. Black Nail shook his head. I'm just one small hobgoblin, smaller than a human. I don't even have elixir anymore, and almost 100 men were killed. I couldn't do that alone. Kida gave Black Nail a knowing look, but Geralt and Beardy nodded along. On the way to the city, Black Nail's hobgoblin minions had stayed back and out of sight of the human bandits. They had no idea that he'd brought them with him. Then who did do it? Geralt mused aloud. Black Nail shrugged and suppressed a smirk. Who knows? It's a mystery. The important thing to focus on is how this affects us, Beardy pointed out. If people think we're involved in that mess then they are going to become after us like hungry wolves. Geralt nodded. You're right, of course. I don't think we can just explain this away, no matter our innocence, especially now that Black Nail has intervened so aggressively. I saved you, Black Nail pointed out. He didn't want there to be any confusion about that. Well, whatever happened, we can't stay here, Beardy remarked. We need to get everyone up and leave this inn immediately, before anyone else comes to look for us. Where will we go? Is anywhere in the city going to be safe? Kida asked. I don't know this city very well, Geralt admitted. Black Nail perked up. I know this city very well. I've even met most of the important people in it, some of them are even still alive. It's the information dealers we need to watch out for. They know everyone and have eyes everywhere. Is there anywhere we can hide from them? I know a lot of abandoned houses we could hide in. There are a lot of dark places people never go in this city. They are dirty but dry, Black Nail offered. He knew the humans were too picky to take him up on his offer. Geralt in particular was a wimp. As if to prove Black Nail right, Geralt grimaced in disgust. No thanks. It seems like we have no choice but to leave Dagger Point. There was thud as Beardy slammed the table with a closed fist. What? Where will we go? Warwick controls all the cities and towns around here. If he is looking for us then we're screwed. Kida winked at Black Nail and then turned to Beardy. He doesn't even know about shelter, let alone control it. You want to go back to that mud pit? We just left. They probably don't even want us there. I don't want to go back there any more than you, the people there are a bunch of nosy hicks, but do we have a choice? There is nowhere else we can lay low until this blows over, Kida shot back. We have money. We could buy proper supplies and gifts for them, Black Nail suggested. They would like us if we did that. Some good wine would make the stay there much more tolerable, Geralt mused as he rubbed his chin. He sounded like he was considering the idea and warming up to it. I suppose it might not be a terrible place to hide out, as long as we bring our own supplies, Beardy admitted. Tannen was always saying he needed a lot of metal tools. Bringing him some would make the villagers happy, Black Nail pointed out. They would also serve his own purposes. True, but for a haul of that size we will need pack animals to carry it, like some horses, Geralt had pointed out. No. Black Nail hissed loudly. His voice was full of fury and disgust. Kida rolled her eyes and Geralt had frowned. Why not? Beardy asked in surprise. Horses can't be trusted. They are vile smelly beasts. No horses will be going with us to shelter. Black Nail replied. Geralt had sighed and gave Black Nail a confused look. Your animosity towards simple animals is misplaced. Why do you hate them so much? Black Nail growled softly before replying. When I look into their big stupid eyes I see their spirit, it is black and vile. They're selfish beasts full of evil thoughts that enjoy people's pain. That's probably your reflection, Kida remarked with a roll of her eyes. Black Nail glared at her. Nuh-uh, no it's not. You humans are just blind and stupid. There was a tired sigh from Beardy. Fine whatever, we will use donkeys instead. You don't have a problem with them, do you? No. Black Nail replied hesitantly. He had no idea what a donkey was, but he wasn't going to admit it. If we're going to be bringing donkeys we may as well grab some other animals, Geralt had suggested. I'm sure Tannen would appreciate some new stock, and it would improve the local menu as well. Good idea, but this is starting to sound expensive. Can we afford all this? Beardy asked. I have some money that I stumbled upon. You humans leave it everywhere, Black Nail said as he placed a pouch on the table. The coins inside jingled as they moved. Black Nail hated parting with so many shiny bits, but he didn't really use them for anything. He usually just ended up hiding them under rocks and stuff. Geralt opened up the bag and looked inside. This will help a lot, but we will still have to watch what we buy. I also have this, Black Nail said as he placed a fist-sized object on the table. It was nugget of pure gold. There was silence as everyone stared at it. Where in all the hells did you get that? Beardy asked. He sounded odd. Yellow rocks sure had a weird effect on humans. I found it in cave near shelter, Black Nail explained with shrug. It was a rock. Where did the humans think those came from? And you didn't tell us? Geralt asked. It didn't seem that important, Black Nail explained. Beardy gave Black Nail a greedy look and stroked his beard thoughtfully. Was there more gold there? Kida sighed and spoke up. We need to focus on leaving right now, remember? There are people after us. Are we sure we couldn't just buy all our enemies off? Beardy asked as stared at the gold nugget. Geralt shook his head unhappily. That probably wouldn't work. It really wouldn't, Black Nail agreed. It didn't even make sense. Why wouldn't they just take the money and then kill them for the rest? Fine, then that settles things. We need to get moving before anyone else shows up to look for us, Geralt remarked as he picked up the coin pouch and gold. Meet me at our last campsite outside the city at dusk, Black Nail told everyone before turning to leave. Where are you going? Geralt asked. I need to meet with some people and cover our tracks, Black Nail told them as he walked away. As the door shut behind him, Black Nail smiled to himself. That had gone well. He hadn't even really needed to convince them to do anything. With a little help from Kida, they had agreed on going back to shelter without any input from him that might have seemed suspicious. Unfortunately, he had more unpleasant duties to attend to now. After looking around the street to make sure there wasn't anyone suspicious around, Black Nail headed off towards Lupira's domicile. It had been her scent he'd detected on the letter, and the thugs had mentioned learning about him from an information broker. Lupira was a seller of secrets, and she probably knew more about him than any others that might be in the city. Black Nail growled as he stepped past a mother and child walking down the street. The conclusion was obvious, Lupira had betrayed him. She had put him and his friends in danger, and she had almost ruined his plans. That meant that Black Nail needed to deal with her. He couldn't let anyone get away with betraying him, and even more importantly, she knew too much. If Lupira told Warwick everything she knew, it would be a disaster. Black Nail had made sure not to tell her any of his plans, but he'd accidentally let a few things slip. She had to be silenced. As Black Nail walked down the street, he tried to figure out the best way of accomplishing his goal. Obviously, he needed to confront Lupira, however the last time he had tried to sneak into her place it hadn't gone so well for him. She also had lots of guards, so fighting his way inside seemed like a lot of work. With elixir a few humans wouldn't be much of a problem for him, but he didn't have any more of it. Could he just walk in? Lupira's servants might still have instructions to let him inside. That might be a trap, though. It was possible that she would lead him right into a room full of enemy soldiers. He wasn't going to underestimate her. Should he go gather up some reinforcements? No, he didn't have time for that. Since all his other options seemed worse, Black Nail decided to take the risk and just ask to see Lupira. During his last visit, Lupira had given him instructions on how to meet with her, since he would make a scene if he went in through the front door. She had told him to go to the back door and knock, so that was what he did. He calmly sauntered around the building and into the empty alley behind it. There was no one around, so he walked over to the door at the back of the building and knocked. After a few long seconds, the door swung open to reveal the older mustached man from his last visit. Both his clothes and his expression looked as unruffled as before as he quickly looked Black Nail over. I'm here to see Lupira, Black Nail explained. He tried to sound friendly, but his rage made that difficult, and the man's smug face annoyed him. Welcome. I will check and see if she is available. Please follow me, the servant replied with a polite nod before turning around. Black Nail cautiously followed the man deeper into the building. Neither of them said anything as they walked, and they kept to empty hallways and back rooms that were obviously used by servants and for storage. Only a single uniformed servant passed them by, and he gave Black Nail a quick glance and then hurried on his way. Eventually Black Nail's guide stopped at a door. Please wait here a moment. I will be right back, the man said with an apologetic smile. Black Nail nodded civilly back. He'd cooled down somewhat. The mustached man then stepped through the doorway. Black Nail got a quick look at a larger and more lavish hallway on the other side before the door closed and he was left alone in the servants' passage. He waited there for a minute or two until the door opened again. Just this way. The mistress is ready to see you, his guide announced as he held the door open for Black Nail. Thank you, the hobgoblin replied cheerfully as he stepped through the frame and out into the brightly lit and lavish hallway on the other side. From there, it was only a few steps to another familiar door. Black Nail recognized it as the room where he'd met Lupira during his last visit. He tensed up as the mustached man glided over and opened the room's door for him, as he had the others. Black Nail had been listening carefully and sniffing the air, but he sensed no signs of ambush. However, that didn't mean there wasn't one. Lupira had managed to surprise him more than once. Gritting his teeth, Black Nail stepped through the door. He had come this far and wasn't going to back down without a good reason. The room in front of him hadn't changed at all. It was still warm, luxurious, and inviting. As before, Lupira was seated on a couch by the low table, but this time she gave off a more businesslike impression. Her silk outfit had been exchanged for a proper blue dress that had long sleeves and went down to her ankles. The outfit still highlighted her bosom and the contours of her body, but it wasn't at all playful looking. Black Nail, this is a surprise. I wasn't expecting you back so soon, Lupira remarked. Her back was straight and her hands were resting on her lap, so that she looked calm and collected. Good, the hobgoblin replied as he looked around the room. He took a second to stare at the room that led off to the side, but nothing seemed out of place. The unique flowery scent that Lupira wore still filled the room. After a few breaths Blacknail could feel it began to clog up his mind and quicken his pulse. However, this time the scent had a slightly different result. His hidden yet roiling emotions skewed the perfume's effects. His fury was only enhanced by lust. He wanted to taste blood, to rend flesh between his fingers and bite bone. Sex and violence weren't so different if done right. Why don't you come sit down and tell me why you're here? Lupira asked. 1 second. I'm just here to ask a quick question, Blacknail replied as he turned back to look at the door he had come in through. The mustached man that had guided him here was still standing beside it. Before anyone could react, Blacknail lunged forward. He reached out, placed a hand on the servant's head, and then pushed. Crack. The man's head smashed into the wall behind him and he crumpled down to the ground. Blacknail smirked. Ah, that had been very satisfying. Gutting him would have felt even better, but Blacknail wasn't sure he wanted to go that far yet. What? How dare you? Lupira hissed as she jumped to her feet. He was annoying, but don't worry. He will live, probably, Blacknail replied as he turned to face her. Lupira's face was red with fury as she glared at the hobgoblin, but she flinched when he took a step towards her. There was a mad grin on Blacknail's face that highlighted his bared teeth. What is the meaning of this? Lupira stuttered as she fought to remain calm. Blacknail pulled the note he had taken from the thugs out of his pocket and took another step forward. You've been telling tales. I don't know what you are talking about. The hobgoblin simply held the note out until Lupira took it. I see, Lupira muttered as she read it. And you think I had something to do with this? Blacknail growled softly as he met her gaze and stared intently into her eyes. Did you? There was silence for several long seconds. Lupira was still, except for her eyes which moved as if she was thinking hard. Eventually she grimaced in distaste and looked away. Yes, I did. A powerful client came asking for information and I had to offer them something. I couldn't just ignore them. You betrayed me, Blacknail hissed as he stepped forward and grabbed her wrist. She didn't try to pull away. That and the fact that she hadn't lied about her involvement allowed Blacknail to prevent himself from lashing out. Rage was still boiling beneath his skin. He didn't like traitors, especially ones that targeted the people close to him. I don't remember forming an alliance with you, and I'm certainly not your servant, Lupira replied as she straightened up and her expression grew steely. Our relationship is a mutually beneficial one, but also ultimately transactional. You put my friends and minions in danger by telling my enemies where they were. If you are going to be working against me, why shouldn't I kill you? I didn't reveal anything you told me in confidence. You never even mentioned where your friends were staying to me. I learned of them through my own means, just as I would have learned who was responsible for Cedric's death if I hadn't already known you were the culprit. Little happens in this city that I don't know about. Just because we are close, that doesn't mean I can afford to never work against you in any way. I'm running a business here after all, and I have duties to my other clients. Blacknail scowled and loosened his grip on Lupira's arm slightly. This was confusing. Was she an enemy or not? Blacknail was fairly sure that she didn't want him dead. She hadn't revealed everything she knew about him, and she could have undoubtedly sent much more dangerous people after him than the two incompetents he had run into. What should I do with you then? Blacknail mused softly to himself. Lupira shrugged and gave Blacknail an annoyed look. It was an impressive display of bravery considering her position. The hobgoblin's long nails were digging into her arm and his teeth were practically in her face. Nothing. Aside from all the fun we've had together, if you harm me in any way I won't work with you ever again. I'm your best source of information and have helped you several times. You need me. So what if we sometimes work at cross purposes? You're a big boy. I'm sure you can handle yourself. Lupira was making a weird sort of sense. It wasn't like she had ever promised to be his ally. They had simply exchanged information. Still, Blacknail knew she was twisting the truth. He could see it in her eyes. There was something about this situation that he wasn't seeing. Giving bits of information about him to his enemies had been part of a plan of some sort. But what had it been? Had she been trying to separate him from his allies? Maybe she wanted to force him out of town for her own reasons? Blacknail didn't know. He wished he had some elixir. If he could taste her fear, then he might be able to figure out what she was playing at. If you're just going to stand there all day, why don't we relax a little? Lupira remarked as she slowly stepped forward so that one of her legs went through Blacknail's legs and brushed up gently against his groin. Blacknail twitched and let her arm go before stepping back. No, you've answered my question, and your advice is as good as ever. I'll be leaving. The hobgoblin turned and stalked out the room, past the unconscious servant on the floor. Lupira was a confusing distraction right now. Killing her would be a waste, and anything short of that would be unproductive. The only option seemed to be more careful of her in the future. Right now, he needed to meet up with Geralt and the others and head back to shelter, where he was beyond Lupira's reach. The tools they were bringing would be very useful, and with the information Blacknail had learned here in Daggerpoint he could begin the next phase of his plan to defeat the wolf. Interlude, Biting the Wolf. The room was silent as Edic watched his boss read the message that he'd just delivered. Warwick was standing behind a desk, and there was a scowl on his face that revealed carefully contained fury. It only got worse as he continued to read. Edic glanced off to the side where Zelena was sitting in a chair. The beautiful but cold blonde woman looked relaxed as she patiently waited for her master to finish. Edic was less sanguine about the present situation. He didn't like being put on the spot when his boss was angry. Although Warwick had a reputation for fairness, he could be very intimidating. He was a huge man and famed for his martial prowess. You didn't keep several small armies of outlaws in line by being non-violent. Edic was used to being around dangerous people, but Warwick was different. He wasn't a noble and he didn't follow the chivalric code. Edic was the last son of a now-deceased knight from lands near the border. He was a knight himself, even if his lands were worth almost nothing but the title they granted. He had seen which way the winds of fortune were blowing and decided to forswear the king who had never done anything for his family and offer his services to the rising power. This is an unwelcome development, Warwick observed in a frosty tone as he finally looked up from the piece of paper. Yes, Sir, Edic replied neutrally. He wanted to draw as little attention to himself as possible. He was just the messenger. Have you read this? Edic flinched and tried to hide it. Yes, sir. I have. That's why I brought the report to your attention right away. Warwick's scowl grew deeper. My subordinates have been slaughtered, and worse, there is absolutely nothing I can do about it. The perpetrators are long gone and have escaped into the forest. Sending men out into the deep green to follow a hobgoblin sounds like a great way to never see those men ever again. This entire mess makes me look weak and foolish. Cedric's position was an important one. Having him in dagger point reminded all the local bandits of my power and control. I need them to fear me. There are too many for me to fight all at once. We can send out orders for everyone to be on their guard, and Cedric can be replaced with ease, Edic quickly responded. The hobgoblin will have a much harder time getting into a properly fortified building full of men that are waiting for him. We can adapt to this tactic with ease. It won't work again. Cedric was lazy and arrogant. Warwick huffed. That's what I like about you, Edic. You're constructive. That's one of the better traits to have in lieutenants, I believe. I'm simply trying to do my best to serve, Edic replied stiffly as he stood straight. And you do a good job of it, Warwick admitted with sour grin. Send out the order, and make sure everyone is on the lookout for hobgoblins. If he isn't afraid to strike at the center of a city, then anyone out on the road should be extra vigilant. Immediately, sir. Of course, that only helps us reduce the damage of any further attacks. It doesn't deal with the actual heart of the problem. As you said, going after the hobgoblin would be difficult. He could be anywhere out in the green, and he undoubtedly knows it far better than we do, Edic agreed. Warwick sighed regretfully. Mahedium warned me about this hobgoblin, and it appears he was right. I thought he was being paranoid, but I was wrong. I admit it. I will have to summon him so we can discuss what he knows about this black nail. You want to meet with him directly instead of just communicating via letter. I don't trust that mage to be completely forthcoming unless it's in person. I've rarely met anyone as secretive as him. From off to the side, Zelena finally joined the conversation. I agree, Lord. It is important you question the mage face to face. He has no allegiance to you beyond convenience. He also won't want to leave his work. The broken wheel has supplied him with a lab and all the toys he could ever want. Warwick scowled again. I don't care what he wants. This comes first. Having magic support is nice, but I can do without any new mana stones. The hobgoblin is much more of a concern. If we can't hunt him down, my first instinct is to set a trap for him, but I know too little about him right now. What does he want? He's a hobgoblin. They are little more than beasts. He probably just struck out at random, Edic said. Warwick shook his head. I don't think so. Mahedium said that the hobgoblin's inhuman intelligence was a threat. The death of Cedric might be only a minor blow against me, but considering the strength of our opponent, it's one of the best opening moves he could have made. Surely that was just luck? I have a hard time seeing a savage like him coming up with a grand strategy. Underestimating him again would be a mistake. Don't forget that after my victory over Herad, most the troops sent after the group he was with didn't come back, and we've lost several other groups of bandits in that area that pledged themselves to me. No, we can't underestimate him. I sense a pattern unfolding. This hobgoblin is going to be a dangerous opponent, maybe my most dangerous. I'm sure you're right, sir, Edic replied. He didn't necessarily agree, but knew better than to challenge his boss when he'd already made up his mind. I usually am, Warwick agreed with a grin. Was there anything else you wanted to bring to my attention? Edic took a second to think and coughed to clear his throat. There has still been no progress in opening communication with anyone to the west, and we lost another scout. Neither the lords nor the outlaws out there care much about what goes on here in the eastern lands. No one even wants to talk. Warwick asked. He sounded slightly surprised. They just want to keep to themselves. As per your orders, we're trying to find someone powerful there to negotiate an ally with, but usually they just kill the messenger for trespassing or speaking with the wrong accent. Zelena spoke up again. That's not surprising. Since this continent was settled, the West has always been a dark and wild place. They've never had kings or any central authority out there on the edge. Every hill is ruled by its own paranoid little lord, and they are always fighting each other, with the occasional break to oppress the peasants. Not that the common folk are any better. They're just as vicious and insular. We can't even find any half-decent maps of the place, Edic agreed. It's all just hamlets and tiny forts out in the forest. Half of them are probably abandoned by now. Hells, they may all be. There might only be a few villages left west of Aloria. It's impossible to tell because they bloody keep to themselves and there are no real roads. Look at what has happened here in the north, everything is collapsing, and they've been dealing with this sort of chaos for over a century. You have a good point, but the difference is that they've always been like this, Zelena told him. I think they never would have settled out there in the first place if they couldn't survive, or they would have died off long ago anyway. Don't forget, the far west was settled all in one big wave from the homelands, and there have always been dark rumors about the nobles that rule them. I don't know much about that. I'm not a scholar, but I don't put much faith in old monster stories, Eddic replied respectfully. Zelena chuckled. And yet our current problems center around a monster from times long past. Regardless, it might be best to just leave the West alone, Warwick admitted. We have problems enough already it seems. Inviting more would be foolhardy. Outside of the occasional raid or trading caravan, the people of the West haven't had anything to do with East for a century, so I doubt we need to worry about them.